Chapter 741. Eric got out of the car outside the Fox headquarters office building in Century City and walked to Elizabeth's office with ease. However, he was stopped by the secretary, who was holding a microphone in her hand. Although she recognized Eric at a glance, she mustered up her courage and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams. Do you have an appointment?" Eric looked at the young blonde girl in front of him and asked with interest, "Can I make an appointment now?" Looking at his watch, Eric continued, "Let's make an appointment at 4:05. It happened to be 4:05 in the afternoon, and the secretary certainly understood that Eric was teasing her. She was even more aware of the relationship between Eric and Elizabeth. However, she had just joined the company a few days ago and didn't know whether she should let Eric in directly under such circumstances. Eric saw the embarrassed look on the secretary's face and said with a smile, "Okay, I'm just kidding. Does Liz have a guest now?" The secretary shook her head. Eric said, "Then call her and tell her that I'm here." Only then did the secretary react. She put down the microphone that was still connected in her hand and dialed Elizabeth's landline. After saying a few words, she motioned for Eric to go in. Eric pushed the door open and walked into Elizabeth's office. Elizabeth was buried in a pile of documents on her desk. Eric noticed that Elizabeth's shoulder, which was wearing a white shirt, paused for a moment when he came in, but she didn't look up to greet him. He smiled, walked around the desk, leaned on the edge of the desk next to Elizabeth, and said, "Why did you change to such an inexperienced secretary? She doesn't know anything." There was no response. Eric smirked and reached out to flick Elizabeth's crystal earlobe. "Ah." With a soft cry, Elizabeth's whole body trembled slightly. She raised her face angrily and said, "You bastard, I'm working. What are you doing here at this time?" "It's nothing. I just came back from San Francisco and suddenly missed you, so I came over to take a look." Humph. A hint of joy flashed across Elizabeth's face, and then her face tensed up again. "What's there to see? I don't have Agent Movie Universe here." "Oh, so today's little flame is here." Eric laughed and reached out to pinch Elizabeth's earlobe. "MGM doesn't have an animation studio either." Elizabeth slapped Eric's hand away and retorted, "That's obviously not the same." "All right, don't be angry. Come, give me a kiss." Eric comforted her softly and lowered his head. This time, Elizabeth dodged slightly and allowed Eric to kiss her on the lips. After he kissed her and left, Elizabeth's tone was still sour as she said, "Mission Impossible, Night at the Museum, Thunderbolt Girls, and now 007. With so many popular series, you're almost spoiling her to death." Eric smiled and explained, "It's not like you don't know the situation at MGM. Without the stimulation of these popular series, it has been declining for so many years, and there's no way it can recover. Besides, Fox is doing well now. This year, Jim Carrey's King of Lies should have a total box office of $180 million in North America. The production cost was only $40 million, and the return on investment was higher than any of the blockbusters released during the summer. Also, I heard that you've been negotiating with Lucas to restart Star Wars. How did it go?" Hearing Eric mention Star Wars, Elizabeth's mood improved a little. The Star Wars series had been popular for more than a decade, and there had always been talk of restarting it. Moreover, according to the agreement, although almost 20 years had passed, Fox still had the distribution rights of the Star Wars series. Although the majority of the profits from this series belonged to Lucas, Fox could still make a lot of money just by relying on the distribution rights of various channels. Elizabeth said, "I've already been in contact with Lucas a few times. The project can probably start preparations next year, but the actual release will have to wait until 1997 at least." Although Elizabeth's tone was still a little unsatisfied, Eric knew that it was 2 years earlier than in his previous life, and that was already pretty good. "There's no point in being anxious about this kind of thing," Eric said. He picked up the document in front of Elizabeth and casually asked, "What are you busy with?" "The script for this year's The X-Files. Can you help me take a look?" The X-Files was about to produce its 6th season. According to the plan, after the 7th season ended next year, Brad Pitt and Famke Janssen would not renew their contracts, and this classic sci-fi series would come to an end. Eric had completely let go of this project a long time ago. He didn't even look at the content of the first 2 seasons. He only knew that the series ratings were very stable. Now that he was looking at the script for the new season, he even felt a little unfamiliar. Seeing that Eric was focused on reading the script, Elizabeth got up and pushed him into her office chair. She said, "Look at it first. I'll go make you coffee." Eric nodded. Anyway, the matters regarding the digital domain branch weren't too urgent. He put the script on the desk and continued to flip to the next page. After a while, Elizabeth came over with 2 cups of coffee. She pulled over another chair and sat down next to Eric. Just as she was about to ask, Eric had already pulled out a few pages from the script and said, "I want this episode. Let them rethink it and make it up to the next episode." "Hey, I asked you to help me take a look at the script. I didn't ask you to take my stuff," Elizabeth protested unhappily. She also curiously picked up the few pages that Eric had pulled out. She had already roughly looked through the script. Now, she could roughly recall the content with just a glance. This episode was about a series of mysterious deaths. During a trip to a high school in New York, a student had a premonition of a plane crash, so he got off the plane before it took off. He also brought some other teachers and students off the plane. After the plane took off, it exploded soon after. All the passengers and crew on the plane died as a result, but some of the people who got off the plane at the last minute survived. However, all of this was not the end. In fact, it was just the beginning. The few people who were lucky enough to get off the plane died in all kinds of accidents in the following days. This incident was classified as a mysterious incident. It attracted Inspector Mueller and his partner Scarlett to investigate, but in the end, they still couldn't stop the few survivors from dying one by one. At the same time, they couldn't find any possible reason. After flipping through the screenwriter's information, Elizabeth said, "I remember now. The screenwriter for this episode is Chinese. They have a lot of mysterious theories. He wrote this episode based on that culture. I think it's about something like the Grim Reaper." There was no doubt that the story in front of him was Final Destination from his previous life. Eric just didn't expect to see this script here, and it was almost used in the X-Files. Smiling as he listened to Elizabeth's vague words, Eric explained, "There is a kind of fatalism in the East. Their Grim Reaper rules that everyone has a certain lifespan. When the time is up, you must die, and no one can escape from the Grim Reaper. This episode's script uses this theory." "Yes, that's it." Elizabeth nodded. Then, she remembered something and said, "I forgot that you can speak Chinese. Then, do they have any other strange customs?" Eric pretended to think for a moment and said, "Yes, their men can marry 7 wives." "Nonsense." Elizabeth curled her lips and waved the script in her hand. She raised her chin and said, "If you want it, give me something in exchange." Eric looked as if he had made a big decision. "How about I let you have it tonight?" Puffed. Elizabeth reached out and lightly pinched Eric's waist. Eric grabbed her little hand and said, "Okay, let's stop fooling around. I have a script for you. Now, I can exchange it with you. This script is very suitable for New Line, and that script is more suitable for Fox." "Ah, what script?" Elizabeth was interested. Eric briefly explained the script for Ace of Spies. He originally wanted New Line to develop this series, but as the relationship between Firefly and MGM became closer and closer, Eric finally decided not to do so. In order to protect the brand's image, just like how Disney would never spoof their own Snow White and Cinderella, MGM would never spoof the 007 series. Although Firefly and MGM didn't have much contact on the surface, Eric had been leading the MGM Secret Agent movie universe project recently. Under such circumstances, it was very inappropriate for the New Line to make a spoof of the 007 series, Trump Card. After hearing Eric's explanation, Elizabeth roughly understood why Firefly did not want the script. She said in a sour tone, "You are really protective of her." "I will protect each and every one of you." "Okay." Elizabeth was slightly touched. She then realized that Eric said you in the plural. She reached out and lightly hit Eric. "Greedy guy." Eric patted Elizabeth's shoulder comfortingly and said, Tomorrow, let the scriptwriter of this episode contact New Line. I will find some time to send the script for Ace of Spies to you. Oh right, one more thing. If possible, try to pick the female lead for Ace of Spies from Victoria's Secret's Angels. I will keep that in mind. But if their acting skills are not up to standard, I will not agree. The female lead for this episode is just a vase. She doesn't need any acting skills. She just needs to be pretty. Eric smiled and looked at his watch. He said, "It's almost time. I will treat you to dinner later, and we can talk about business." "I knew you wouldn't come to me for no reason," Elizabeth muttered. She began to pack her things and prepared to leave early. The two left the company together. Eric wanted to call Julia, but he found out that Julia had gone to the UK. Shakespeare in Love. In a restaurant in Beverly Hills, Eric was surprised to hear Elizabeth say the name. It turned out that the Waynestam brothers had already started preparing for Shakespeare in Love, and had invited Julia to be the female lead. Julia thinks that Daniel Day-Lewis is the most suitable actor to play Shakespeare, so she personally went to the UK to invite him. 2 years ago, after In the Name of the Father and The Age of Innocence, Daniel Day-Lewis had temporarily retreated from acting due to his marriage. Furthermore, his output wasn't high to begin with. Eric wasn't optimistic about Julia's motive for going to England this time. However, Eric soon remembered another thing. Shakespeare in Love was definitely the big winner of the 1999 Oscars in the original space-time. It even won the Best Water Empress Award. However, there was Forrest Gump this year. Eric absolutely did not believe that the Waynestam brothers could use Shakespeare in Love to promote Forrest Gump. "Mira, what is the detailed production plan of Mike Smith? I mean, it shouldn't be released this year, right?" There was this plan. Elizabeth flipped through the menu in her hand and glanced at Eric. She said, "However, Harvey is very optimistic about this project. He also knows that if it is released this year, this film will definitely not win against Forrest Gump at the Oscars. So he pushed it to next year. Julia is rushing to the UK now because she wants to ask Daniel Day-Lewis about his schedule next year." "Oh, that's good." Although the Best Actress at the Oscars in the previous life was not that good, there was no doubt that Shakespeare in Love had the ability to win the Oscars. If it clashed with Forrest Gump, it might be another tragedy in the history of the Oscars. A tragedy. There was Forrest Gump this year, then next year, Titanic. If Forrest Gump was expected by the public, then Titanic would definitely beat the Oscars with the box office. Elizabeth noticed the change in Eric's expression and asked, "What's wrong? I mean, does Julia want to win an Oscar or something?" Eric thought for a moment and asked. Elizabeth nodded and said, "She wants to try, so she invited Daniel Day-Lewis. However, it's fine as long as she can get nominated this time. Anyway, she's not in a hurry." Julia was only 28 years old. It was not easy for actors, regardless of gender, to win an Oscar before the age of 30. After hearing Elizabeth's words, Eric said, "Then why not wait for 2 years? I mean, for this project, if we can't invite Daniel Day-Lewis this time, maybe we can wait for another 2 years." Elizabeth was stunned for a moment. She roughly understood and said, "Next year? There won't be another film on the level of Forrest Gump, right?" Eric shrugged and said, "I'm not too sure about this kind of thing, but the possibility is, very high." Elizabeth let out a long breath and said to Eric, "How can you let others live?" Chapter 742. After dinner, the two were not in a hurry to leave the restaurant. After ordering 2 cups of coffee, Eric talked about the establishment of a digital domain branch in Australia. Digital Domain's annual turnover is close to US $1 billion, right? Why, Elizabeth enviously asked. Eric nodded. However, because most of the orders are from Firefly, the profit margin is not high, only 10%. In order to prevent the outstanding special effects artists under Digital Domain from leaking out, Eric offered very generous salaries and bonuses for these people. Therefore, it also ensured that the talent under Digital Domain still maintained a very low turnover rate, even though the entire industry was in short supply. The higher manpower cost also greatly reduced the overall profitability of the digital field. However, Eric did not expect this special effects company to bring too much profit to Firefly. The main role of Digital Domain was to assist in the production of Firefly's films and allow Firefly to maintain a strong position in the special effects field. Elizabeth understood some of the key points and said, "Last month, Fortune magazine listed the top 500 companies in the United States. Even the entry companies only received $2 billion US. With how tight the special effects industry is now, as long as we continue to expand in the digital field, we will definitely be able to easily enter the list when we go public. Why do you want to set up a branch in Australia? Although you can get some benefits, it's far away from Hollywood, and many things will become very inconvenient. Right now, there are more and more special effects companies in Hollywood. I'm sure you've noticed this. So in the future, the biggest factor restricting the development of special effects companies will no longer be technology, but cost. I'm making preparations in advance." Why, Elizabeth nodded. She stirred the coffee in front of her with a spoon and said, "I haven't been back to Australia in the past few years. I'm not familiar with the things there. If you want to contact the Australian government, you should talk to my dad about this." "Your dad is smart. I don't want to deal with him." Why, Elizabeth raised her eyebrows and said, "You mean I'm easier to fool?" "Yeah." Eric nodded solemnly and joked. "However, your ability to understand is not a problem." Elizabeth raised the spoon in her hand threateningly, then put it down and said, "Even if I wanted to, I really can't help." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Dad has already begun to train Lachlan and James to be in charge of the newspaper business. Most of our family's businesses in Australia are print media businesses. It's not convenient for me to intervene there." Although News Corporation's newspapers and media outlets were spread all over the world, Australia was News Corporation's headquarters. News Corporation controlled more than 70% of Australia's media resources, which was much higher than the 40% share in the UK. Although Eric was well aware of the future decline of the print media, Murdoch obviously didn't think so, and he had always regarded the print media business as the foundation of News Corporation. Eric could tell from Elizabeth's brief words that Murdoch was still inclined to let his son take over the business. Otherwise, he would not have let the two of them be in charge of the foundation business of News Corporation, and only let his daughter be in charge of the film business. At this time, with a large number of newspapers around the world, more than 50% of News Corporation's profits came from the print media business. In addition, there were some TV stations in Australia, the Far East, and the UK. Although Fox had been developing very well in recent years, it was not the most important in the entire News Corporation. However, if this situation continued to develop, it would be interesting in the future. In his memory, News Corporation would undergo a split more than 10 years later. It would be resplit into the News Corporation, which focused on the print media business, and the Fox, which focused on the film and television business. At that time, because of the decline of the print media, the new News Corporation's market value was only about $2 billion US, which was only 2% of Fox's market value of more than $80 billion US. Then, as long as Elizabeth could firmly control Fox, it was equivalent to inheriting the entire News Corporation. By then, TSK. What are you thinking about? Why are you smiling so slyly? Elizabeth's voice sounded in his ear. No, nothing. Eric immediately shook his head and said, I think, since your old man arranged it this way, you can focus on the Fox business. Well, you don't have to worry about the Digital Domain branch. I'll find time to talk to him personally. Elizabeth narrowed her eyes and looked at Eric for a moment. She pouted and said, I feel like you're up to something. Liz, you have to believe that I've always been on your side. Is this you singular or plural? Eric did not hesitate and said, singular. Elizabeth smiled but still said, as if I'd believe you. Since he had made up his mind to let Elizabeth manage Fox, Eric did not talk about the Digital Domain branch anymore. He finished his coffee, looked at his watch and said, It's still early. Let's go watch a movie. Oh. Elizabeth dragged her voice and said with slight dissatisfaction, How many times have you treated me to a movie? Is this the first time? Seems like I have to choose carefully. How about Independence Day? I'm not going to watch your movie. Let's watch Bragger. What a good girl. You're thinking about your family even when watching a movie. Eric handed his credit card to the waiter and complimented her. Elizabeth raised her chin and said proudly, "Yeah, not like you." In the following days, Eric personally communicated with Murdoch. Murdoch was naturally very willing to help, but he still put forward a condition. He hoped that News Corp could invest in the Digital Domain Australia branch. Eric did not hesitate and agreed to give News Corp 30% of the branch's shares. With Murdoch's help, Stan Winston quickly brought the management team to Australia to negotiate with the local government. The Australian government was well aware of the benefits of having a giant special effects company in their country, and they were quite enthusiastic about it. With the help of the local tyrant, the Murdoch family, they quickly came up with a tax reduction plan that would last for 10 years. At the same time, in order to attract more films, the Australian government also gave a US $7.5 million cash subsidy for the upcoming filming of The Matrix in Australia. This was equivalent to 10% of the filming budget of The Matrix. Of course, Hollywood also reciprocated. After the announcement of The Matrix, all the special effects for Thor: King's The Lord of the Rings series would be handled by the Australian Digital Domain branch. At the same time, in August, there was another sensational news in the United States. On August 24th, Microsoft officially launched Windows 95 at their headquarters in Seattle. With a better user experience and overwhelming publicity, Windows 95 sold 1.4 million copies in the first week. Windows 95 is different from Yahoo's free browser. Windows 95 has a price tag of $210. This price is not cheap even 20 years later. That's why Microsoft's 1.4 million sales in the first week is almost $300 million. Microsoft's share prices shot up again. As their competitor, Apple's operating system was getting more and more outdated. There were not many innovations in the past few years. In addition, Apple's recent PC products had suffered from various problems, and their sales had plummeted. Therefore, after Windows 95 was released, it immediately showed signs of dominating the market. However, Apple was far behind. While Windows 95 was selling like hotcakes, the sales of Apple computers also ushered in a precipitous decline. Eric received an invitation to the Windows 95 conference, but he did not go to Seattle to join in the fun. After all, although Windows 95 was selling like hotcakes, he was not in a good mood. This was because in the following weeks of research, the most popular software for the Windows 95 operating system was the latest version of Yahoo's browser. After the browser, it was still not Microsoft's own software. It was Yahoo's YCR chat tool. After that, it was Microsoft's own Office software suite. Windows 95 had greatly reduced the difficulty of using computers for ordinary people. However, Bill Gates felt he was working for someone else. Without a doubt, the capital market was also very sensitive to this change. When Microsoft's stock price soared, Wall Street's valuation of Yahoo had increased to $5.6 billion. Many investors started to approach Yahoo, hoping to invest in it. A week after Windows 95 was released, Microsoft quickly launched their MSN portal, which Jeff Locke was in charge of. The layout was similar to Yahoo's portal format. This was considered an announcement of their entry into the internet industry. Although Jeff Locke was responsible for some of the research and development work at Yahoo, he had been responsible for the operation of the website after that. Furthermore, he was very tight on time. It was conceivable that MSN could only be considered a facade. Whether it was in terms of content or user experience, it was far from comparable to Yahoo's portal. Eric only browsed MSN's portal a few times and stopped worrying. With MSN's current status, it might not catch up with Microsoft even after a few years of development. Furthermore, Yahoo was also improving rapidly. It was September, and the North American summer holiday had ended. A few major film companies had regained some market share because Firefly and MGM did not release any new films. However, Firefly and MGM still accounted for more than 50% of the market share during the entire 14-week summer break. This year's summer holiday was the worst for Sony Columbia. They had lost the rights to release Forrest Gump and Night at the Museum. Sony could only buy a few films to fill the gap. But these films only grossed 10 to 20 million US dollars at the box office. The highest grossing film was only 31 million US dollars. Sony's total box office for the entire summer holiday was less than 100 million US dollars. Because of Batman Forever, Time Warner's share of the box office during the summer holiday was not low. But because of the high cost, Time Warner's film business suffered more losses than other Hollywood companies. Other than Firefly and MGM, only Universal and Fox did better. Paramount had a new film starring Tom Cruise, but due to the blockbusters during the summer holiday, they delayed the release until the new year. As a result, Paramount's box office performance was only slightly better than Sony's. Firefly's headquarters were still cheering for this year's box office results. But Eric had already left for New York. It was September, and the summer holiday was over. The fall TV series had started. The production of America's Top Model and Project Runway was coming to an end. Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista had even put the project on hold and temporarily devoted themselves to preparing for the New Year's Victoria's Secret show. Eric came to New York not only to watch these two reality shows, but also to take a short break. It was September in East Hampton. Eric was sitting lazily on the lawn of the manor, flipping through the script in his hand. Joanna was sitting quietly beside him, peeling an apple. After a while, a peeled apple was handed to Eric. He took a bite but did not take it. Joanna smiled and asked, "What do you think of the script?" "There are still some areas that need to be improved, but overall, I'm very satisfied," Eric said as he turned another page. Joanna said, "You've been working so hard on the script recently. Are you interested in it?" Eric raised his eyebrows and nodded. "Yes, it's almost time for me to start my next movie. But the main reason is that I like this script." The script in Eric's hand was Casino Royale 007, which he and the scriptwriter team of MGM had been working on. The original Casino Royale was set after 2010. Although it was the first of Ian Fleming's original works, other than the casino plot, the rest had little to do with Ian Fleming. The story revolved around a huge sum of money, and there were still all kinds of hunts, fights, and explosions. However, in the original version, there was the first woman who made Bond fall for her. This woman, Vesper, became an indispensable factor in the success of this Bond sequel. Even the sequels more or less mentioned this Bond girl, who Bond fell in love with for the first time. Eric also liked this character very much. Therefore, although the script in his hand had made a lot of changes to fit in with the Secret Service movie universe, the character of Vesper was completely retained. Eric was now thinking about who to play Vesper. In his memory, Eva Green, who played Vesper, was only a 15-year-old girl. The shrewdness, stubbornness, gloominess, and mystery of this character were not easy to replace. Eric searched all over Hollywood, but could not think of a suitable candidate for the role. Chapter 743. Hearing that Eric was really planning to shoot a James Bond movie, Joanna said, "The James Bond series must be shot all over the world. Do you have that much time to travel?" "If I want to do it, I can always arrange it," Eric said. In recent years, with the development of the internet and digital communication technology, long-distance communication became more and more convenient. No matter where in the world, it was convenient to keep in touch with Los Angeles. Therefore, even if he was away for a long time, he could still keep in touch with the headquarters. What's more, Firefly Group was now completely on the right track. There were no big expansion plans in recent years. Eric's departure would not have a big impact on the group's operations. Thinking in his heart, Eric threw the script aside and lay down on the lawn lazily, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon. Anyway, the female lead and the shooting plan would have to wait at least until next year. There was no need to worry about it at all. The big production that MGM was currently shooting was The Breakin' Girls 2, which would be released next summer. Then there was Mission Impossible 2, that had just been negotiated with Kevin Costner. It would also be shot early next year and released at the end of next year. In this way, James Bond, Casino Royale would probably start shooting in the middle of next year, at the same time as Amazing Night at the Museum 2, and would be released in the summer of 1997. Then the specific preparations for this project would have to wait at least until the beginning of next year. As for the Lord of the Rings series, it would have to wait until 1997 to start production. After all, MGM had just stabilized and needed to accumulate for another 1 or 2 years before they could announce a one-time investment of $300 million to produce the Lord of the Rings trilogy. MGM was about to issue new shares. If they announced the start of the project soon after the financing, it would definitely cause anxiety in the capital market, causing MGM's stock price to fluctuate. What MGM needed the most now was a stable development environment. Although Eric was very clear about the potential of the Lord of the Rings series, others would not know this. They would only see the huge risk of a one-time investment of $300 million. Seeing that Eric was lying down, Joanna thoughtfully took a pillow from the side and put it under his head. She looked at her little man with gentle eyes. Her slender fingers gently stroked Eric's eyebrows, as if she wanted to smooth out the frown on Eric's face. Sleep for a while. You're always thinking about things. You'll be very tired. Eric smiled and hugged the woman. Come accompany me. Joanna struggled slightly and leaned against Eric. She felt Eric's big hand sliding down her waist and lifting up her t-shirt to get inside. She smiled and reached out to hit him. Don't mess around, people will see. Eric scratched Joanna's soft waist and said, Why don't we go to the beach in front? He don't. Joanna smiled and twisted her body, pressing down on Eric's strange hand. Emma's school is about to end. I'm going to pick her up later. Let the servant do it. I don't feel at ease if they go. Anyway, I have nothing to do. Eric smiled and hugged Joanna in his arms. Smelling the faint fragrance of the woman's golden hair, he said, The 3 of them are really lucky to have you to take care of them. Joanna said, I like them too. Have they been naughty during this period of time? As their father, I can help you teach them a lesson. Of course not. They've been very obedient. Really? Eric deliberately said in a doubtful tone. I heard about Shashya. Vicky told me on the phone last time. Don't mention it. It's too embarrassing. I don't know how Shashya got the password to HBO. That night, when I came out of the shower, Shashya pointed at the man and woman on the TV and asked me, Mom, what are they doing naked and hugging each other? I didn't know how to answer. Haha. Eric couldn't help but laugh. After a while he asked, What happened after that? It wasn't easy to coax her. Later, I found out that Eva was watching TV and Shashya saw her enter the password. She remembered it after seeing it once. Joanna smiled and continued, Shashya isn't naughty. She's just a little too curious and smart. Since that's the case, maybe we can hire a tutor for her after some time. Or you can teach her yourself. I've been teaching her Polish recently. She's learning very quickly, Joanna said. Eric nodded and said, That's not a bad idea. After chatting for a while, Joanna looked at her watch and stood up. It's almost time. I'll go pick up Emma. Okay. Eric nodded and kissed Joanna. Watching the woman leave, he closed his eyes and enjoyed the last touch of warmth in the evening sun. Joanna returned to the villa and told the maid a few things about dinner. She didn't see Hawaii or Kevin around, so she asked, Madam, Miss Eva is here. She didn't tell us to tell you and Mr. Williams. She's now watching a movie with Miss and young master in the screening room. Joanna nodded and went to the private screening room of the villa. She opened the door and saw her sister and 2 little ones sitting on the luxurious leather chairs in the dim light. The movie on the screen was Men in Black. Seeing the door of the screening room open, Eva Pakula quickly lowered the volume and greeted, Hi, big sister. Joanna turned on the lights and looked at the 2 little ones sitting obediently beside Eva. Then she turned to her sister. Isn't it Fashion Week? Don't you have work? Eva hugged Kevin in her arms like a doll and said pitifully, Can you not talk to your sister in such a disdainful tone? I've been rushing to 3 shows in the past 2 days. I'm exhausted. Although Eva had some feelings for Eric in the past, it had been a long time and those feelings had faded. Joanna also knew that her carefree sister simply liked the rich life in East Hampton Manor. Joanna treated her sister, who was 14 years younger than her, like a mother. She doted on her sister and hoped that she could be independent. Seeing Eva's pitiful eyes, Joanna was a little helpless, but her heart softened. She leaned against the door and asked, "How are you getting along with the boy Emily introduced to you?" "We broke up with that guy a long time ago. He actually has a drinking problem. Who knows if he'll hit people when he's drunk. I heard that all American men have this problem. You don't want your sister to be beaten up in the future, do you?" Okay, I can't be bothered with you." Joanna sighed and glanced at the screen. "Don't bring Xia and Kevin to movies in the future. I'm going to pick up Emma. Since you're here, don't forget to say hello to Eric." I know. Eva saw that her sister had finally let her off. She quickly nodded and pointed at Hawaii. "Xia, say goodbye to Mommy." "Goodbye, Mommy." Hawaii stared at the screen without turning her head. Joanna left with a helpless look. Eva saw the door close and cheered. She changed into a comfortable position and leaned lazily on the leather chair. A moment later, a small voice sounded beside her. "Auntie Eva, why are the cockroaches in the movie so big?" "Because they're alien cockroaches." "What's an alien cockroach?" "They're cockroaches from another planet." "Where are they?" "Oh, you're so annoying. You have so many questions. I might as well buy you an encyclopedia." "What's an encyclopedia?" "It's a book that can answer all the questions you want to know." Hawaii's eyes suddenly lit up. "Auntie Eva, then can you buy me an encyclopedia?" "An encyclopedia isn't just one, it's a whole set. It's so expensive. Ask your father to buy it for you. He has money." Hawaii blinked her beautiful big eyes and remembered this in her heart. She asked again, "Then Auntie Eva, is Daddy also from another planet?" "Ha!" Eva Pakula was stunned. Then, she remembered the scene where Eric made a cameo appearance in the movie. She laughed and pinched Hawaii's cheek. She said mysteriously, "Yes, your father is an alien. You're also a little alien, haha." At this moment, the movie on the screen ended. Eva got up, turned on the lights, and turned off the equipment. She carried the clumsy little Kevin and held Hawaii's hand as she walked out. The three of them went to the lawn in the backyard. Seeing Eric lying there sleeping, Eva touched Hawaii's head and smiled mischievously. "Xia, go and ask your father which planet he's from." Hawaii looked at Eric lying on the lawn, and then turned to look at Eva Pakula. "Humph, do you think I'm as stupid as Kevin? Daddy is sleeping. He'll definitely be angry if he's woken up." Hawaii blinked and said, "Auntie Eva, Mommy asked you to greet Daddy just now." "Okay, little vixen." Eva Pakula rubbed Hawaii's little head. She remembered that she still had a little person in her hands and quickly put Kevin down. She squatted down and said to him, "Kevin, go and wake your father up. Tell him it's time for dinner." Kevin also blinked and nodded clumsily. Then he walked toward Eric. The two girls with the potential to be two-faced stood still and watched Kevin walk to Eric's side. They were anticipating a good show. However, Kevin walked to Eric's side and sat down on the ground as if he had completely forgotten Eva's instructions. He picked up the script that Eric had thrown to the side and started flipping through it. He had no intention of disturbing his father's sleep at all. Eva's eyes widened. She was shocked. Could it be that this was the true black-bellied person? Eric felt something strange beside him in his sleep. He opened his eyes and saw Eva sitting beside him. She was looking at her precious son, who was flipping through the script, as if she was looking at a child prodigy. Kevin obviously couldn't understand it. A few pages had already been torn out. Eric sat up, hugged his son, and kissed him. Then he hugged Hawaii and asked, What's going on? Did you look at the wrong person?" Eva shook her head. Her eyes were still lingering on Kevin for a moment. Then she said, TSK, Kevin will definitely not be simple when he grows up. He's more suitable to be the President of the United States." "Oh, what nonsense are you talking about?" Eric shook his head and said, "What about you? Isn't it Fashion Week recently?" "Yeah, isn't it Fashion Week recently? Why didn't I go to work?" Eva pouted and directly continued Eric's words. She said unhappily, "Please don't be like my sister. I was just interrogated once." Eric didn't know the situation. He shrugged innocently and said, "Okay." With that, Eric got up and walked toward the villa with the two babies in his arms. He said to Eva behind him, "Ask the servants to tidy up this place." "I understand, master." Eva dragged her voice. Eric carried Kevin and Hawaii into the living room and sat down on the sofa. The little girl obediently leaned against her father. Her big eyes looked up and down at Eric. After a while she asked, "Dad, where is Pandora? Are you really from that planet?" Eric was stunned. Then he remembered. He pinched his daughter's face and said with a smile, "Baby, why are you suddenly asking this?" Hawaii raised her face and looked at Eric's head. She said, "I just saw you in a movie. Aunt Eva showed me." "Okay, Dad is not from Pandora. It was just a movie," Eric replied. "Then, Dad, can you buy me a set of encyclopedias?" "What do you want this for?" Aunt Eva said that all the questions can be found in the encyclopedia. Eric touched his chin and looked up and down at the little girl in front of him. He smiled and said, "Baby, do you know how old you are now?" 2 years and 5 months. Hawaii's mind was very clear. "Yes." Eric smiled and said, 2 years and 5 months. So, you should do what a 2-year-old child should do. Like Kevin, play with toys, eat, and sleep. Hawaii looked at her brother and shook her head. "But these things are so boring." "But this is the life a child of your age should live. When you grow up, even if you want to go back to the present, it will be impossible." Hawaii didn't understand why she wanted to go back to the present in the future, but she nodded obediently. Then, she stared at her father with sparkling eyes. She had a cute expression she learned from Emma. "Dad, can you buy me a set of encyclopedias?" Eric slapped his forehead. All right, it seemed like he had wasted his breath. However, after hearing his daughter repeatedly talk about encyclopedias, Eric suddenly remembered that Yahoo didn't have an encyclopedia section yet. This service would definitely be a big traffic user. Maybe he could send an email to the Yahoo team tonight to mention it. After thinking for a while, he saw that his precious daughter was still looking at him with hope. Eric could only say, "Okay, I will get someone to send a set over tomorrow." "Thank you, Dad," Hawaii said. She leaned over and kissed Eric on the cheek. Then, she stared at Eric's expression for a few seconds to make sure that her father wasn't patronizing her. Then, she jumped off the sofa and ran off. This throwing it away after using it. Isn't it a little too obvious? Eric thought desolately as he looked at his daughter's small figure running away. Chapter 744. While Eric was enjoying his vacation in East Hampton, many people were not as relaxed as him. September 17th, the last day of New York Fashion Week. In Bryant Park in Manhattan, Linda Evangelista finished her last show of the Fashion Week and said goodbye to the organizer in a hurry. She didn't even have time to remove the smoky makeup on her face before she got into her car and urged her assistant to rush to the ABC headquarters on the Upper West Side. America's Top Model and Project Runway would start airing in the next 2 weeks. The president of AE Television Network and Sweeney had invited her and Cindy Crawford to discuss the final stage of the publicity work. Even if the AE Television Network's reform plan failed, it wouldn't have much of an impact on Firefly Group, which had an annual revenue of $20 billion. However, for Annie Sweeney and the employees of AE Television Network, as well as the production teams of the 2 reality shows led by Cindy and Linda, the success of America's Top Model and Project Runway, as well as the prosperity of AE Television Network, were directly related to their future careers. Therefore, everyone was working very hard during this period of time. 10 minutes later, they arrived at the office of Anne Sweeney, who was in charge of AE Television Network. Cindy Crawford was already sitting there. Anne Sweeney and Cindy were talking in a low voice. When they saw her come in, they quickly got up. "Good afternoon, Anne. I'm sorry I'm late." "It's okay. You're not late," Anne Sweeney said as she hugged Linda. Although Annie Sweeney was swift and decisive in her work, and sometimes even a little ruthless, she was very warm in her dealings with others. Furthermore, their age difference was not too big. During this period of time, the few women had become good friends. After greeting each other, Anne Sweeney picked up a few documents and led the 2 women to a small conference room. Sitting around a small conference table, Anne Sweeney said, "The basic situation has been confirmed. Although the headquarters has tried their best to fight for more, the number of subscribers for the new season of Lifetime TV station is still only 34.5 million. Compared to last year, it has only increased by 3 million. This is also the total number of viewers we have. Cindy frowned slightly. This number was only 1/8 of the current American population. She recalled something that Eric had mentioned previously and asked, "And why is the increase so small? Are those operators not interested in Lifetime's reform plan?" Of course not. The situation here is very complicated. Take Time Warner for example. Not only did they not increase Lifetime's subscriber base, they even reduced Lifetime's subscriber base by 800,000 this season. This is a game of interests. Ever since the media control was further relaxed, the operators can own their own cable television stations. The market is only so big, and not every operator wants to see the rise of their competitors. And Sweeney shook her head and explained, "But the main reason is that Lifetime's ratings have been too poor in the past, and it hasn't brought much profit to the operator. This is also why they have been so indifferent to Lifetime's reform plan. So everything will depend on the ratings of the next 2 TV series." After listening to and Sweeney's explanation, Linda looked at Cindy and couldn't help but ask a question that no one was willing to face. "And, what do you think the ratings of our show will be?" And Sweeney pressed the document in her hand and looked at the two women. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Actually, this is what I wanted to ask you too. These 2 projects were conceived by Mr. Williams. Didn't you talk to him about this?" Linda shook her head and said, "We asked him, but he didn't say anything." And Sweeney nodded regretfully. She flipped through the documents beside her and found a copy to pass to the 2 women beside her. She said, "For these 2 shows, the company and the advertisers signed a floating contract. According to the contract, the passing line for the 2 shows is 1.5 million viewers, and the ratings will reach 0.8. With this data, the average advertising fee for 30 seconds is $50,000, and each episode is 16 minutes, so the revenue will be $1.6 million. The total revenue for the 13 episodes will be $20 million. After that, we will be able to break even with the operator's cut and the subsequent distribution of the show." Linda and Cindy looked at the document in front of them. After a while, Cindy looked up and said, "So, and what were the ratings of Lifetime last year?" And Sweeney hesitated for a moment before saying, "In 1994, the highest ratings was a TV movie called The Seventh Floor. It starred Brooke Shields and had 2.21 million viewers. Last year, the average primetime ratings for the whole year were 700,000. Less than a million?" Linda almost jumped up in disappointment. And Sweeney nodded. She didn't tell the 2 women that this was only the average primetime ratings. If the ratings were spread over the whole day, the numbers would be even worse. Because of this, Lifetime's advertising revenue for the whole year was only about $30 million. It wasn't even as high as the operator's cut. It could be imagined that it would not be an easy task to increase the viewership to 1.5 million, more than doubling it in one go, under the condition that the subscriber base did not change. Noticing the disappointment on the 2 women's faces, and Sweeney said encouragingly, "I don't think we need to worry too much." During the ABC period, the company didn't pay much attention to Lifetime. Without outstanding shows, the ratings wouldn't go up. It's different now. Just the production cost of the 2 shows in your hands is more than the total investment of Lifetime's shows in the past 5 years. Moreover, we have the full support of the company's headquarters in Hearst. I'm very confident in the ratings." Linda was more open-minded. Hearing in Sweeney's words of comfort, she quickly nodded and said, "Anyway, this show was created by him. If it fails, I'll go back to being a model. It's not like I'll starve to death." Hearing Linda's discouraging words, Cindy really wanted to reach out and pinch her. She was speechless. She turned to and Sweeney and said, "And didn't you call us over to talk about the promotion?" And Sweeney chose to ignore Linda's words. She smiled and said, "It's like this. I've talked to ABC. Cindy, get ready. Tomorrow's recording of Late Show with David. Linda, your schedule will be next Wednesday." In order to stagger the timing of the 2 reality shows, America's Top Model was scheduled to air next Tuesday, September 19th. Project Runway was scheduled to air a week later, on September 28 on a Thursday. After properly handling ABC's late-night news program Nightline, ABC poached David Letterman from CBS and successfully took over this ace talk show. During this period, Firefly and Hearst had used their own channels to promote America's Top Model and Project Runway as much as possible. There was also a lot of relevant news on Yahoo. However, because the two shows had not proven their ratings potential, it was impossible to invest unlimited amounts of money into them. Therefore, this kind of support was ultimately limited. Therefore, taking advantage of the time before the show's broadcast to promote it on ace talk shows could be said to be the most effective method. Of course, it was also the last method. The two women had experience participating in talk shows. Especially last year, because of the explosive popularity of the Victoria's Secret show, they had received many invitations, so they were not unfamiliar with this aspect. After a brief discussion of some details, and Sweeney brought the two women to ABC's production department to negotiate with David Letterman's team. Amidst the intense busyness, 2 days passed by in a flash. On September 19th, the results of the past few months of hard work would be verified today. For countless ordinary people, Tuesday was still an ordinary day. Most of the students' summer vacation was coming to an end, and they were enjoying their last days off. Young people who had entered society had finished another day of work. Because it was a work day, very few people went out to have fun. After dinner, they were either alone, hugging their loved ones, or holding their children as usual, sitting in front of the TV. They did not know that at ABC's headquarters in Manhattan, many people were anxiously waiting for the ratings results of the new day. They just happened to recall that recently, they had inadvertently seen the promotion of America's Top Model in newspapers, magazines, and TV programs. Therefore, they picked up the remote control and remembered that their cable package happened to have Lifetime. They took the opportunity to switch to it, wanting to find out what was going on. As for those who did not have access to Lifetime, even if they were more into fashion, although they felt a little regretful, they did not mind too much. People who were indifferent to fashion did not feel anything. After all, they did not lack TV programs to pass the time. For any TV program, you had to be able to target the audience's tastes and capture their emotions to be successful. In order to achieve this goal, Eric had put in a lot of effort. For a model talent show, what young women who liked fashion and had some fantasies about the runway wanted to see the most was, without a doubt, an ordinary girl suddenly appear in front of everyone. If there was a word to describe it, it would be a sparrow turning into a phoenix. The theme Eric had meticulously planned for the first episode of America's Top Model was a sparrow turning into a phoenix. At 8 o'clock, after the last commercial, Lifetime's TV screen flashed and lit up again. The opening title of America's Top Model appeared. A series of magnificent artistic photos flashed by quickly. At the same time, Cindy Crawford's voice was heard. "Cindy, there are always people who ask me how to become a supermodel. Every time, I patiently guide them. You should do this, you should do that. Until one day, I suddenly felt that perhaps I could use the television to tell all the girls who dream of becoming a supermodel all at once. Then, today, welcome to America's Top Model." After a selection process, we have selected 13 girls from all over the United States. Some of them are from small towns in the West, some from the City of Angels, some from the South, and some from the North. From today onwards, I will use the next 2 months to select the next rising star of the modeling industry through various standard training. The final winner will receive a modeling contract with Elite Modeling Agency, a $100,000 endorsement contract with CoverGirl, and more opportunities in the future. Then let's start now. As Cindy, who was dressed in professional fashion, appeared on the screen, the auditions of girls from all over the United States appeared on the screen. Time flew by in an apartment in Midtown Manhattan. The two girls, Alice and Charlotte, who had met Eric by chance, had separated. Alice had moved in with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a Morgan Stanley financial analyst named Scott. He was forced to watch a fashion show that he wasn't very interested in, so he was full of complaints. The image of Cindy hugging his girlfriend was quite pleasing to the eye. However, when the ordinary girls appeared on the screen, Scott couldn't help but laugh. Haha, Alice, do you think these ugly ducklings can become supermodels? What a joke. If they can become supermodels, then you can become an international supermodel. Alice looked at the ordinary girls on TV and was also a little disappointed. She liked Cindy Crawford. At the same time, she had heard that this show had something to do with Eric, so she paid special attention to it today. Therefore, when Cindy announced that she was going to turn these ordinary girls into supermodels, she was also disappointed. Most of the girls on TV had great figures and good-looking faces, but no matter how you looked at them, they definitely didn't have the glamour of a supermodel like Cindy. Seeing her boyfriend pick up the remote control to change the channel, Alice thought for a while and stopped him. Scott, wait a little longer. Scott was quite considerate. Seeing that his girlfriend insisted, he went along with her wishes. However, he didn't forget to add, "Okay, I'll just treat it as a joke." In front of the thousands of TV households that had chosen America's top model, most of them had the same thoughts as Alice and Scott. Some of them had even changed the channel in disappointment. The show continued on TV. The lucky girls began to gather in the fashion capital of New York. Their different personalities, backgrounds, and experiences were displayed cleverly through the camera lens. Gradually, the audience forgot about these ordinary ugly ducklings. Perhaps they found their own shadows, or perhaps they were controlled by curiosity and voyeurism. Slowly, many people forgot their initial disappointment and began to immerse themselves in the show with great interest. Chapter 745. Through the contestants' real-time filming and interviews, the audience had a general understanding of the girls halfway through the first episode. Cindy Crawford appeared with two other guest hosts and started the contestants' first competition. She announced that after the competition, one of the 13 girls would be eliminated. The audience in front of the TV was also stunned. It was only the first episode, and the elimination mechanism was already in such a hurry. Wasn't it a little too cruel? Unknowingly, many people's attention was firmly captured by the show. The scene changed. When the camera showed the Arsenal on Lexington Avenue, the contestants cheered in surprise, and the audience couldn't help but widen their eyes. The Victoria's Secret fashion show was at the height of its popularity. The Arsenal on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan was also the venue for the first Victoria's Secret fashion show. It had become a fashion mecca in people's hearts. Many young people who had seen the Victoria's Secret fashion show would go to the Arsenal to pay their respects when they came to New York. "Hello, girls. You must know where this is." Cindy Crawford appeared in front of the audience again and greeted them warmly. Amidst the infatuated cheers, Cindy Crawford continued, "Then your first test will be held here. The costumes used in this competition are all handmade by the top designers of the LTD group. Each of you can choose any one of the 20 outfits. There will be professional designers backstage to take care of your styling. Then, you will experience the first fashion show of your life. Now let's begin. Remember, everyone only has half an hour to prepare. Okay, go, go, go." Following Cindy's order, all the girls rushed backstage. The camera followed them and soon appeared in a hall. There were 20 sets of exquisite female outfits in the hall, one by one, on the plastic mannequins. These outfits were the latest autumn collections of the LTD Group's Brighton fashion show. Of course, compared to the finished products sold in the stores, these outfits were more exquisite and high-end. The camera swept past these exquisite female outfits and turned to the contestants again. On the screen, some of the girls were dazzled and kept wandering between the outfits. Some of the girls couldn't wait to choose an outfit and then rushed to the dressing room. There were even two girls who chose the same outfit at the same time and didn't give in to each other. They even had an argument. All of this was vividly recorded on camera. Even when the two girls were arguing, no one stepped forward to stop them. In the end, both girls realized that if this kind of argument continued, it would only lead to them being eliminated. Only then did they compromise with each other. This kind of realistic conflict greatly satisfied the voyeuristic desires of the TV audience. They couldn't help but start to comment on the girls they liked or hated. The makeup scene that followed quickly ended with the fast editing. After a TV commercial, the screen went black. With a series of clicking sounds, The bright lights on the ceiling of the munitions factory performance hall lit up one after another. A familiar scene appeared in front of everyone. Although there was a big difference in the layout of the scene, many people still remembered clearly that just last year, on that very same runway, 40 carefully selected Victoria's Secret angels put on a magnificent show that attracted the attention of everyone. However, when they thought of the 13 very mediocre girls, many people couldn't help but wonder if those girls had the ability to walk on the runway. Their curiosity was piqued and the audience's eyes were locked tightly on the screen. On the screen, Cindy Crawford turned around the arch of the backstage exit and walked slowly to the runway with a nostalgic smile on her face. Wow, how nostalgic! However, today the stage belongs to our girls. Well, let's not talk nonsense. Let's start now. After that, Cindy and the other judges sat in the guest seats. The photographer in charge of taking photos set up a professional camera at the end of the runway. The music started and the lights began to flash. At the exit of the runway, when the first girl appeared on camera, almost everyone in the audience was stunned. It was a complete 180-degree change. Some people didn't even remember which girl in the camera was the previous one. The gorgeous handmade clothes, the style created by the top designers, and the lighting and music in the scene created a beautiful dreamy scene. In fact, professional fashion people knew very well that even some supermodels looked no different from ordinary people in daily life. They wouldn't amaze people at first glance. The reason why they looked like goddesses on the runway was that in addition to their own professional skills, clothes, makeup, lighting, and music played a very important role. In the eyes of the ordinary audience, the contestants' steps on the runway were obviously inexperienced and far from being comparable to those supermodels. However, after a series of professional elements and clever editing by the production team, everyone suddenly felt that sparrows had transformed into phoenixes. At the beginning of the show, many people still doubted whether these girls had the potential to be models. However, when the 2-minute runway show was over, everyone's doubts were dispelled. Some girls in front of the TV, who originally thought that they would never be models, couldn't help but feel a sense of immersion in their hearts. They imagined what would happen if they stepped on the stage. When the fashion show was over, many people were still thinking about it when the cruel elimination round came. As the photos in Cindy's hands were reduced one by one, many people's feelings were firmly grasped. They prayed that the contestants they liked would not be eliminated, and many people hoped that the contestants they hated would leave. When the results came out, some people felt lucky, some regretted, and some people complained that it was unfair. However, nothing could be changed. Subconsciously, many people began to silently look forward to the next episode. At the headquarters of ABC, although Anne Sweeney told Cindy that she could go back and wait for the results, Cindy still stayed in Anne Sweeney's office. Fashion Week was over, and this year's Victoria's Secret fashion show was in the early stages of preparation and fitting. Cindy and Linda weren't too busy for the time being, so Linda also came to join in the fun. The three women chatted nervously as they drank coffee, glancing at the TV in the office from time to time. Unlike ABC, Lifetime TV didn't have the special treatment of receiving real-time ratings from Nielsen. They could only get the rough statistics after the show was over. The detailed data would have to wait until the next morning. After the first episode, a full half-hour passed. Someone knocked on the office door, and Sweeney got up and walked out. Cindy knew that the results were coming out. She took a deep breath and felt that her heart was beating a lot faster. Glancing at Linda, who was leisurely drinking coffee and flipping through the pages of the magazine in front of her, she said unhappily, "Why do you look so relaxed?" "It's not my show. Why should I be nervous?" Linda said without raising her head. "Then why are you here today?" Linda shrugged and looked a little mischievous. "Nothing. I just wanted to see how restless you are." Cindy's heart was instantly filled with anger. She raised her hand and said, "Do you believe that I will strangle you to death? Don't scare me. I'm timid." Linda shrunk her neck timidly. However, her pretense was too obvious. Cindy reached over and pinched her waist hard. Linda quickly dodged and cried out in pain. "Ah, you evil woman. You really pinched me. Humph, do you think that I've been joking with you?" Linda pulled open her leather jacket and lifted her purple sweater to look at her waist. Cindy didn't use too much force. The place where she was pinched was only a little red, but there were no bruises. Linda gently rubbed it and muttered, "I will definitely complain to Eric. Just you wait. I'll say that you have child abuse tendencies." "Ha, don't think that you can pretend to be Loretta just because you have a baby voice. Child abuse? Look at how old you are." "Of course I'm not Loretta." Linda snorted and said half of her sentence. Cindy obviously knew the meaning behind Linda's words. Just as she was about to say something, and Sweeney pushed open the office door and walked in. She hurriedly stood up and looked at Anne's expression. Seeing that she was relaxed, she immediately relaxed. At least, from Anne Sweeney's expression, the viewership ratings were not bad. And Sweeney was indeed in a good mood. She waved the form in her hand and smiled. "Take a guess. What's the viewership ratings?" Linda blurted out, 700,000? "I'll hit you." Cindy stared at Linda and said to Anne Sweeney, "All right, and I'm so anxious." Anne Sweeney smiled and handed the form in her hand to Cindy. She said, "From the preliminary results, the viewership ratings are definitely going to break the record. The highest viewership rating is 2.75 million. The average viewership rating is 2.3 million, and the average viewership rating is 1.3. It has already far exceeded the viewership ratings of last year. I'm already thinking that we can use this gimmick to promote the movie for the next week." Cindy looked through the data and relaxed. The average viewership rating is 2.3 million, which is 800,000 more than the estimated 1.5 million viewership rating. It is more than 3 times the viewership rating of last year's Lifetime TV station. This number is definitely amazing. Although it could not be compared to the 4 major TV stations, Lifetime TV station only had a viewership of 30 million. This number was equivalent to taking away 1/15 of that viewership. If this ratio was converted to a public channel with universal coverage, the viewership should be around 18 million. Linda leaned over and looked at the form in Cindy's hand. She said, "Although it's not bad, I feel that this should be the result of all the previous promotions. The actual viewership ratings will have to be determined in the future, right?" After hearing this, Cindy was stunned. The excitement in her heart cooled down a little. Although the production cost was $20 million, the promotional resources invested in this period of time by various channels, if converted to cash, would be close to $10 million. This amount was comparable to the movie's promotional budget. It was definitely very high in the television industry. $10 million in exchange for the highest viewership rating of $2.9 million in the first episode. This was almost natural. The actual results of America's Top Model would still have to be determined by the viewership ratings. Annie Sweeney, on the other hand, was more optimistic. Even if the viewership ratings would start to drop, with 2.3 million viewers, it would definitely not be a problem for them to maintain an average score of 1.5 million and above after a season. As long as the show's reputation was not too bad, the show could continue to be produced. Although she hoped for a miracle, and Sweeney did not lack the desire to play it safe, many things had to be done step by step. After all, America's Top Model was an inconspicuous basic cable channel. After the first season of America's Top Model aired, the response from the media was not too great. It could not be compared to the strong TV series that were gradually starting to air on public channels. Another reality show that satisfies people's curiosity and voyeurism. The plot is a little messy, but it firmly captures the audience's emotions. Although the audience is small, it is worth watching. This is a reality show that imitates the style of Survivor, but it focuses on the modeling industry that young people are interested in. Cindy Crawford is still as brilliant as ever. In the first episode, the contestants' transformation from mediocre to gorgeous was also eye-catching. I really like the segment where mediocre girls turn from sparrows into phoenixes, but I'm rather disgusted by the baffling elimination mechanism. I really can't see why that contestant named Lena would be eliminated. Perhaps it's just to attract the attention of the audience. In the midst of these mediocre discussions, Firefly and the Hearst Group began to focus on the gimmick of America's Top Model, breaking Lifetime's viewership record. After all, the audience did not know much about Lifetime's internal affairs. People often subconsciously thought that a show that broke the viewership record must be very good. However, although the direction of the media was not very popular, this program quickly became a hot topic among the young girls. Whether it was high school girls or college girls who were full of fantasy, or young women who had already entered the workforce or started a family, after America's Top Model aired, they unknowingly had an additional topic of conversation with their girlfriends. Did you watch America's Top Model yesterday? That Courtney is really a B*TCH. I really hope Cindy eliminates her. And has long legs and the best body. I think she is very likely to be the final winner. I feel like the judges' elimination criteria are a little erratic. I think the contestants are eliminated based on their personal preferences. It's a little unfair. No. I think they're eliminating the contestants based on whether they can bring viewership to the show. Wow, if that's the case, and will definitely be eliminated next time. She looks very quiet. Who knows? If and is eliminated, I'll never watch it again. The clothes sponsored by LTD are so beautiful. I saw them in L. They're going to release some new clothes in the fall. I can buy one when the time comes. I like the light yellow one. Similar conversations quickly spread among the young women in the following week, and quickly became a craze. Chapter 746. In the early days, the popularity of a TV show could only be seen through the viewership curve over a long period of time. If the TV station wanted to know the audience's opinion, they could only do so through newspaper surveys and random phone interviews. This method of obtaining information was very inefficient and not very accurate. However, with the rise of the internet in recent years, this situation quickly changed. After the broadcast of America's Top Model, although it wasn't very popular in traditional media, its popularity among the general audience was directly displayed on the internet. In just a week, the America's Top Model section of Yahoo Forum gained nearly 180,000 new members. On Yahoo's search engine, America's Top Model quickly became a hot topic. The number of fans on Cindy Crawford's personal page skyrocketed. Before the show was broadcast, her personal page only had a little more than 10,000 fans. However, within a week of the show's broadcast, this number had skyrocketed to 120,000 and was still rapidly increasing. This was because the personal page service had just been launched. Although the overall number of users was large, the related social networks were still in the cultivation stage. Most of the popular people's personal pages only had around 100,000 fans. It was far from the scale of millions and millions of fans. Therefore, with the popularity of America's Top Model, Cindy Crawford's fanbase was far ahead of everyone else in the industry. It even attracted the attention of traditional media outlets. Unknowingly, the topic spread like wildfire and a week passed quickly. Because of the previous week's audience feedback, everyone was full of confidence in the viewership of the second episode. However, when the viewership statistics for the second season of America's Top Model were released, people were pleasantly surprised. The highest viewership was 3.5 million and the average viewership was 2.8 million. The viewership reached 1.6, breaking all of Lifetime's viewership records once again. Although the viewership numbers were far from comparable to public relations television stations, in terms of viewership data for the core audience between 18 and 49 years old, which was the most important demographic for advertisers, because the audience of America's Top Model was mainly young women, the 1.6 viewership rating was comparable to that of a public television series. The production and promotion of America's Top Model and Project Runway had always been closely linked. Stimulated by the popularity of America's Top Model, the first episode of Project Runway also achieved an average of 2.6 million viewers on Thursday. The highest number of viewers easily exceeded 3.1 million. Although Project Runway was a fashion production show, under the supervision of Eric and the Survivor team, this reality show wasn't as professional and rigid as the audience had imagined. The audience, who originally had doubts about a more professional reality show like Project Runway, quickly accepted it. They enjoyed watching the contestants fight openly and secretly, as well as the delightful way in which they turned any material into exquisite fashion. With the increase in viewership ratings, the traditional media keenly grasped the potential of the two reality shows and began to report on them. This caused the popularity of America's Top Model and Project Runway to spread rapidly. In the following weeks, the viewership ratings of the two reality shows showed a trend of rising neck and neck. In less than a month, the average viewership of the two reality shows broke the 4 million mark at the same time. America's Top Model was more popular than Project Runway after all. The highest viewership rating for the fourth episode even reached 4.6 million. At the same time, in just a month, with the popularity of the two reality shows, more and more people began to take notice of Lifetime TV. Due to the viral popularity of America's Top Model and Project Runway, or due to curiosity, or because they wanted to follow the topics of the people around them, many people chose to change their cable packages when they realized that they didn't have Lifetime TV in their cable packages. Because of this, the number of subscribers of Lifetime TV easily broke through 40 million from the initial 34.5 million in the following month. The operators that carried Lifetime TV's signal were better off. After receiving a user request, they could easily change their subscription packages. However, the operators that didn't carry Lifetime TV's signal weren't doing so well. Among them, the unluckiest was undoubtedly Time Warner. This matter started when Lifetime TV was preparing for its reform plan. When the plans for the two reality shows were confirmed, Katzenberg personally contacted the executives of Comcast, Telcom, Time Warner, and several other operators, hoping that they could carry Lifetime TV's signal on a larger scale. However, because Lifetime TV's performance was lukewarm, the major operators were very indifferent to Katzenberg's request. Katzenberg went around lobbying, but the results were minimal. By the time America's Top Model aired, the number of subscribers had only increased by a mere 3 million. The operators like Comcast and Telcom didn't have a large number of their own TV stations. They didn't increase or decrease the number of subscribers of Lifetime TV. Most of the time, they relied on Lifetime TV's viewership data. However, Time Warner was different. After learning about Firefly Group's reform plan for Lifetime TV, they considered that once Lifetime TV rose to prominence, it would definitely compete with Time Warner's WBTV station, which also had a younger audience. Therefore, not only did Time Warner not cooperate to increase the number of subscribers of Lifetime TV, but they also changed the package before the fall and reduced the number of subscribers of Lifetime TV by 800,000. What was even worse was that some of the subscribers that Time Warner cut were concentrated in major cities like New York and Los Angeles. The fashionable women of Los Angeles and New York were the most potential subscribers of the two reality shows, America's Top Model and Project Runway. After hearing this news, Katzenberg immediately called the head of Time Warner Cable and gave him a good scolding. However, perhaps it was just as the saying went, settle accounts after autumn. The fall hadn't even passed yet, but Time Warner had already suffered retribution for their little trick. If America's Top Model and Project Runway didn't become popular, then for the 800,000 subscribers who had their Lifetime TV signal cut off, Lifetime TV would naturally be dispensable and no one would care about it. However, the current situation was far beyond everyone's expectations. As the broadcast progressed, America's Top Model and Project Runway had already become a hot topic for many young women. When everyone was talking about a certain contestant on America's Top Model, who had been regrettably eliminated, or when their best friends were chatting about a certain stunning outfit on Project Runway, because their cable TV package didn't have Lifetime TV signal, they couldn't say a word at all. One could imagine the awkward situation. American operators also had territorial monopolies. In order to avoid unnecessary competition, operators like Comcast, Telcom, and Time Warner had tacitly divided their territories. In some of the more remote areas, residents could only choose one operator to access their cable TV signal. If they were unlucky enough to encounter such a situation, they would naturally admit that they were unlucky. However, in metropolitan areas like New York and Los Angeles, the major operators basically fought over every inch of land, so such a potential monopoly situation didn't exist. Therefore, those subscribers who couldn't find lifetime TV signal on Time Warner Cable's cable TV package turned to Comcast and Telcom in order to watch America's Top Model and Project Runway. In October, when Time Warner Cable's cable TV department counted the number of subscribers again, they were shocked to find that in just 1 month, Time Warner had rapidly lost 460,000 subscribers. What did this number mean? Time Warner Cable's total number of subscribers was only 15 million. After losing 800,000 Lifetime TV subscribers, the remaining subscribers to Lifetime TV were only 3 million, which was the lowest level among the major operators. The root of all this was, of course, the competition between Time Warner and Firefly. But now, losing 460,000 subscribers in a month was already equivalent to 3% of Time Warner Cable's total subscriber base, and this was only in a month's time. It should be known that in the entire 1994 year, Time Warner Cable's subscriber base had only increased by 1.6 million. Moreover, if this situation continued, not only would Time Warner's cable TV business not show any growth this year, but it would also fall back to the level of 2 or even 3 years ago. Terry Semel, who was in a terrible fix because of the failure of the summer movie business, heard the news and called the person in charge of Time Warner Cable's cable TV department to give him a good scolding. Time Warner Cable's internal department originally wanted to deal with this matter quietly, but for some reason, the news suddenly spread. In an instant, the news of Time Warner Cable's cable TV business plummeting flooded the media. Although everyone knew what was going on, Time Warner wanted to suppress Lifetime TV's development, but because of the strong rise of America's Top Model and Project Runway, in the end, they went for wool and came home shorn. Losing 3% of subscribers in a month, how much would they lose in a year? Many people couldn't help but ask, and no doubt many of Time Warner's shareholders had the same thought. Thus, the management once again received pressure from all sides. In order to settle this matter, someone had to step up and take responsibility. Time Warner's internal power was intricate, and a cable TV department was entrenched in several powers. Everyone knew the ins and outs of this matter. In fact, if it were any other company, if they encountered such a situation, they would basically do the same. Therefore, this wind blow could not be considered a management error at all. Terry Semel couldn't stir up internal disputes under external pressure. In the end, he could only bite the bullet and use his own spokesperson in the cable TV department as a scapegoat. A few days later, Time Warner announced that the original vice president of the cable TV department would be leaving due to a decision-making error, which could be considered as an explanation to all parties. But of course, this matter couldn't end just like that. Lifetime TV's popularity was still rising rapidly, and Time Warner had already lost 460,000 subscribers. If they didn't reconnect to Lifetime TV's signal as soon as possible, and the situation continued to develop, the situation would definitely worsen. The cable TV operator's platform wasn't something that a TV station could access as they wished, but at the same time, the operator couldn't arbitrarily access the cable TV signal without authorization. There were two sides to everything, and everything depended on which side was stronger. After hurriedly dealing with the external pressure and shareholders' pressure, Terry Semel personally called Katzenberg's phone. The call was transferred to Katzenberg's secretary's office, and the reply he received didn't seem to be surprising at all. "Mr. Katzenberg is not here. When can I contact him? I'm not sure." After several unsuccessful attempts, Terry Semel had to call Robert Iger, who had just taken over the helm of Firefly TV. Robert Iger's attitude was very enthusiastic, but he only said that because AETV Network was a joint venture with Hearst Group and was an independently operated cable TV department, it was not appropriate for him to intervene in Lifetime TV's internal affairs. He condescended again and directly called AETV Network's president, and Sweeney was even more direct. "I'm sorry, Mr. Semel, I don't have the decision-making power on this matter." In the office of Time Warner headquarters in Manhattan, Terry Semel was rejected 3 times in a row. He almost threw the phone in his hand. He looked at the gray sky outside the office window and took a few deep breaths before Terry Semel calmed down. Terry Semel certainly understood that this was Firefly's counterattack to Time Warner's original decision. They wanted to deliberately delay Time Warner for a few months. However, Time Warner definitely couldn't afford to wait in the current situation. If Time Warner's cable TV subscribers dropped by hundreds of thousands next month, as the CEO, he might be involved in this matter. Terry Semel frowned and thought for a long time. Just as he was considering whether or not to fly to Los Angeles to talk to Katzenberg, he suddenly remembered that the young man behind Firefly should be in East Hampton now. Although he hadn't visited, it wasn't difficult to find out where Eric lived. After a few phone calls, he quickly got the address of Eric's manor in East Hampton. After thinking for a moment, Terry Semel ordered his secretary to prepare a car. He planned to personally go to East Hampton. After all, as the absolute controller of Firefly Group, if he could directly get Eric Williams's promise, it would definitely be far better than repeatedly tangling with Katzenberg and the other senior executives. Moreover, although he admired the young man for creating such a huge industry in just a few years, deep in his heart, Terry Semel still felt that Eric Williams was, after all, young. He would definitely be easier to deal with than the shrewd Katzenberg. After all, no matter how talented a person was, in terms of business experience, they still relied on the accumulation of a long period of experience. Chapter 747. 2 hours later, Terry Semel arrived at East Hampton by car. The car was parked on a small road 1 kilometer away from Eric's manor. Terry Semel took out his phone and dialed Eric's private number, but a woman with a soft voice answered the phone. After a while, the phone was transferred to Eric. Terry Semel said that he happened to pass by East Hampton and asked if he could visit. Eric's tone on the phone was normal, and he agreed very enthusiastically. After hanging up the phone, the driver in the front seat looked at Terry Semel. "Mr. Semel, do you want to go now?" "No, wait for 10 minutes, Terry Semel said as he put away his phone. Although both sides were well aware of the situation, they still had to pretend. If they were too anxious, they would inevitably be at a disadvantage. The driver nodded, turned off the engine, and waited patiently. Terry Semel leaned against the leather seat and carefully considered the wording of the next negotiation. 10 minutes passed unknowingly. Through the rearview mirror, the driver saw that his boss was frowning and thinking. After thinking for a while, he decided not to remind him. After a while, Terry Semel came back to his senses. Just as he was about to instruct the driver to drive, a police car came straight from behind and stopped not far away. After 2 policemen got out of the car, they looked at the black Mercedes-Benz license plate and went forward to knock on the driver's window. The driver lowered the glass window in confusion. Just as he was about to speak, the policeman outside the window said in surprise, "Tony, it's you." "Hey, Loki." The driver saw the police outside the window and greeted him excitedly. He turned his head and said to Terry Semel, "I'm sorry, Mr. Semel. Can you wait a moment? Loki is my former comrade." Terry Semel waved his hand, indicating that it was fine. The driver quickly pushed the door open and got out of the car. Considering that his boss was waiting for him, the driver named Tony did not exchange too much pleasantries. After a few simple words, he returned to the driver's seat and started the car to drive to Eric's manor. What happened just now? Terry Semel didn't forget to ask. He also realized that the 2 police officers wouldn't appear here for no reason. Tony pointed at the unconcealed camera on the lamppost outside the window. "They saw us from there." Loki said that Eric Williams donates a lot of money to the East Hampton Police Department every year. Terry Semel glanced at the camera on the street lamp outside the car window and thought that Eric Williams was really concerned about the safety of his 2 illegitimate children. The inefficiency of the American police was evident from the fact that they only solved about 20% of cases per year. His car had only been parked 1 kilometer away from Eric Williams's manor for more than 10 minutes, but it had already attracted the police's interrogation. This was not something that could be achieved by throwing money at them. When the car arrived outside Eric's manor, Terry saw a tall woman in a light gray sweater and white jeans waiting at the door. He asked the driver to leave and got out of the car alone to greet her. "Hello, Mr. Semel." Joanna smiled and shook hands with Terry Semel. She explained, "I'm sorry. Eric is talking to someone." You may have to wait for a while. Hello, Ms. Pakula. Terry Semel smiled and shook hands with Joanna. He recognized that it was the female voice that had answered the phone not long ago. He said, I came to visit on the spur of the moment. Maybe it's a little abrupt. Joanna shook her head and said, Of course not. Please come with me. Terry Semel followed Joanna into the manor. He gently looked at the woman who had become famous a few years ago because of tornado, and then suddenly retreated. His thoughts turned to the two policemen who had just appeared. Thinking of the two little guys who had rarely seen any news about them in the media in the past 2 years, Terry Semel felt that perhaps Eric Williams's attitude towards these two children was definitely not like those rich people who avoided illegitimate children. These two little guys might even become the heirs of the Williams family in the future. Thinking of this, Terry Semel suddenly felt a little regretful. It was a pity that Joanna Pakula's child was a girl. If only it was a boy. Joanna Pakula was Jewish. According to tradition, the child was also Jewish. If it was a boy, his inheritance rights would definitely be greatly increased. In the future, he would also have a greater sense of identity with the Jewish community in Hollywood. Terry Semel was very clear that the reason he could reach the position of CEO of Time Warner today was absolutely inseparable from his Jewish ancestry. Although this position was not as easy as he imagined, in the Time Warner system, many shareholders and board members supported him. In addition to his personal ability, another important reason was that they had the same ancestry. Following Joanna all the way into the manor villa, Terry Semel did not have time to look at any of the household decorations in the villa. Instead, he was attracted by a little girl who was sitting at the coffee table in the living room and reading a large book. Joanna noticed Terry Semel's gaze and led him to the sofa to sit down. She said to the little girl, Xia, the guest is here. Remember to greet him. This is Mr. Semel. The little girl who was sitting on a small stool beside the coffee table and reading quietly raised her head. Her eyes were as beautiful as her mother's, pure and bright. With soft blonde hair and a small face with a little baby fat, she gave people the feeling of a doll. The little girl and Terry Semel looked at each other for a while. She curiously looked at his rimless glasses for a moment before she said, Hello, Mr. Semel. Terry Semel's eyes fell on the thick book in front of Hawaii. At this time, he could tell that it should be one of the books in the Encyclopedia of Great Britain. He was a little surprised, but he did not ask. Instead, his tone became gentler, as if he was worried that he would disturb something. He said, Hello, Xia. Joanna smiled and explained, Mr. Semel, this is my daughter, Hawaii Williams. Please sit for a while. Eric will come down soon. I'll make some coffee. Terry Semel thanked Joanna and watched her walk away. He looked at the little girl and the book a few times. When he saw that the little girl's face was very focused, he felt strange again. He wanted to ask someone whether the Encyclopedia of Great Britain was something that a 2- or 3-year-old girl could understand. Or was he already old? After a while, Hawaii quietly turned a page of the book in front of her and read a few paragraphs. She raised her head and looked to the side. Her mother was not sitting in her original seat. There was a thick English dictionary beside her. When she was about to take it, she realized that there was an adult beside her. She turned her head and asked in a familiar tone, What does emperor mean? At this time, Terry Semel had already seen that the encyclopedia was a biology section. Hawaii was flipping to the page where the word, Emperor Penguin, was written. When he heard the little girl's question, Terry Semel realized that the little girl should know the meaning of penguin. However, she did not know the meaning of the word emperor in Emperor Penguin. English was different from Chinese. Chinese was a hieroglyphic language. Even if one did not know how to read some Chinese characters, they could often guess the general meaning based on the shape of the characters. However, English was a phonetic language. As long as one understood the rules of reading, most people could read it. However, if one wanted to understand the meaning of a word, they would need a professional explanation. Well, things finally made sense. Although it was still a little unbelievable, Terry Semel still gently and patiently explained to the little girl in front of him. Emperor means emperor. It's similar to king. King, do you know? Hawaii nodded and pointed at the illustration of emperor penguins in the book. She asked, Have you seen emperor penguins before? I haven't. Emperor penguins live in the very cold Antarctic. It's difficult for humans to survive there. The little girl blinked and asked, since humans can't survive in the Antarctic, how do we know that there are emperor penguins in the Antarctic? Terry Semmel was even more surprised. This question sounded very philosophical, but the little girl in front of him was clearly only 2 or 3 years old. Seeing the little girl's bright eyes staring at him, Terry Semmel thought for a moment and said, although we can't survive in the Antarctic for a long time, we can go there for a short period of time. Then we can discover emperor penguins. Hawaii asked, how can we survive there for a short period of time? Terry Semmel smiled and said, we can make a lot of equipment, thick clothes, and sturdy houses. We can use these things to resist the cold weather in the Antarctic. This way we can survive there for a short period of time. The little girl nodded and said, then why don't emperor penguins need these things? Because they have evolved for many years and have adapted to the environment there. We humans can't adapt to it and can only use foreign objects. Why are we humans inferior to emperor penguins? Can't we evolve? No, no, no. Little girl, you're wrong about that. We humans are the most outstanding creatures on this planet. The emperor penguins live in a very narrow environment, but we can go to any corner of the world. We can even leave the planet and go to the distant space. That's because we have intelligence. We can use intelligence to do that, but other creatures can't. When Hawaii heard Terry Semmel's words, she seemed to understand. Then she seemed to have thought of something and said, I saw on television that lions have intelligence too. They can work together to catch prey. Terry Semmel's gaze became even gentler. He looked at the thick book in front of the little girl and said, no, Xiaxia, that's not wisdom. Wisdom must be something that can be passed down from generation to generation. Animals like lions and tigers can't do that. Oh. Hawaii nodded and looked at the book in front of her again. Terry Semmel straightened his body. He felt Joanna's figure beside him holding a cup of coffee and quickly stood up. Joanna had been standing quietly by the side and did not disturb their conversation. Now she handed the coffee over and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Semmel. Xiaxia can be a little clingy sometimes. No, of course not. Terry Semmel smiled and shook his head. Just a short conversation with the little girl in front of him calmed him down. He had been irritated by the recent series of trivial matters in the company. Terry Semmel even felt that if he could have a little personal relationship with Eric, he would definitely be thick-skinned enough to recognize Hawaii as his goddaughter. Of course, it was a pity that he could only think about it. His current position did not allow him to have too much interaction with Eric. Joanna sat beside Terry Semmel and chatted for a while. Then a man and a woman walked down the stairs. The man was naturally Eric. Terry Semmel quickly recognized the woman. She was the host of America's Top Model, Cindy Crawford. I'm sorry, Terry. I made you wait for so long. Eric went forward and hugged Terry Semmel warmly. He introduced, this is Miss Cindy Crawford. Hello, Cindy. Terry Semmel shook hands with Cindy Crawford and said respectfully, your show is great. My daughter likes it very much. Thank you. Cindy Crawford smiled and nodded. Joanna knew that they had something to talk about. She stood up and put away the book in front of Hawaii. She pulled the little girl to the backyard and said, okay, Xiaxia. We agreed that we could only watch for 2 hours a day. Time's up. The little girl followed her mother reluctantly and said, Mom, I found a problem. I'm 2 years old now. I can watch for 2 hours. When I was 3 years old, I could watch for 3 hours. But there are only 24 hours a day. What will I do when I'm 25? Joanna said softly, oh baby, when you're 25, I won't take care of you anymore. But Aunt Eva is almost 25. Why do you still want to take care of her? Joanna smiled and said, because your Aunt Eva is too stupid. She's not as smart as our Xiaxia. Hearing the conversation between the mother and daughter, the people in the living room, including the maids not far away, laughed softly. Terry Semmel looked at Joanna's back and said to Eric, this little girl is too smart. Maybe this is the power of genetics. Maybe. Eric smiled. Cindy Crawford, who was sitting next to Joanna, saw that Joanna took the initiative to leave. She knew that the following conversation was not something she could participate in. However, she was not willing to leave. Just as she was wondering what to do, Eric took the initiative to say, "Cindy, it's almost time to prepare lunch. Let's stay for lunch. You can discuss with Joan about what to prepare." Okay. Seeing that Eric did not chase her away this time, Cindy was relieved. In fact, she found an excuse to visit Virginia because she heard that Virginia was out for filming. Joanna was a gentle person. As long as Eric did not say anything, no one would chase her away. After sending Cindy away, the maids in the living room tactfully left one after another. Only then did Eric start chatting with Terry Semmel. Chapter 748. When Cindy Crawford walked to the door that led to the backyard, she turned her head and saw that Eric and Terry Semmel had already started chatting. She then pushed the door open and walked out. It was almost noon, and the late autumn sun shone on the spacious manor. The temperature at the end of October had dropped below 20 degrees, and even the sunlight seemed to be a little pale due to the low temperature. Although the lawn in the yard and the surrounding shrubs were evergreen plants, there were also withered leaves at this time, and it was no longer as lively as before. Cindy didn't like this kind of cold environment, but when she looked around, the autumn sky seemed to be very low, and behind a few white clouds was a breathtaking blue. She could see the horizon just by looking over the fence not far away. This kind of open atmosphere made her feel comfortable. Cindy couldn't help but stretch her body lazily and asked the maid who was cleaning the withered leaves next to the fence where Joanna went. She then walked across the lawn and walked towards the place where there were a few fiery red maple trees by the sea. Joanna was sitting under the maple tree with a thick booklet on her knees. She was surrounded by two small figures who seemed to be collecting maple leaves. When Joanna saw Cindy walking over, she waved at her with a smile. She then took a maple leaf from Kevin and patiently commented on it in a low voice. She then put it in the booklet on her knees. It wasn't even 11 o'clock yet, and Cindy wasn't in a hurry to pass on Eric's instructions. She looked at the thick maple leaves on the ground and sat down next to Joanna. She then said, "These maple trees are really beautiful." Are they maple trees? I feel that the trunks are different from the ones I've seen before." Joanna nodded and pointed at the holes on the trunks. She then said, "This is sugar maple. You can use the sap to make maple syrup in the spring." "Oh, so this is sugar maple." Cindy came to a realization and carefully examined the small holes on the tree trunk. Maple syrup had very low sugar content and was not easy to make people fat. It was a food that women liked very much. She often ate it, but this was the first time she recognized the sugar maple tree that produced maple syrup. "We still have maple syrup at home that we specially brewed this year. You can try it at noon," Joanna said. She saw Hawaii running over with a leaf in her hand. She took the leaf from her daughter's hand and looked at it. She said softly, "Baby, this leaf seems to have been crawled by insects. Look, the marks on it are very ugly. Go and look again." Hawaii looked at where his mother was pointing and asked curiously, "Mom, why do these things appear when insects crawl on the leaves?" Joanna vaguely remembered that it should be the secretion left behind by some insects that corroded the leaves. She explained it in a language that Hawaiians could understand in a low voice before sending the curious little fellow away. Cindy had been listening to Joanna's words. When Hawaii ran away again, she said, "Joan, you are so patient." Joanna smiled and gently looked at the little figure who was picking up the maple leaves, as if she was looking at the whole world. After a while, she asked Cindy, "How's your discussion with Eric going?" Cindy nodded and looked very relaxed. She said, "I plan to produce another season of the show in the spring. He has already agreed." Since Cindy had specially come to visit, there had to be a reason. Cindy's reason was definitely not perfunctory. As the ratings for America's Top Model became more and more popular, Cindy started to worry. When Cindy first got the project, she had her private accountant calculate her possible earnings according to the 10% share contract. According to the accountant's calculation, the number of viewers she could get paid more was about the same as the number calculated by Lifetime TV, which was 1.5 million viewers. If the ratings were lower than that, she could only get a minimum salary of $800,000, which was what she had fought for during the drafting of the contract. At that time, she was a little proud because as far as she knew, that idiot Linda had never thought of this at all. Hence, the contract did not have a minimum salary clause. If the ratings were not good and the project did not generate profits, her months of work would have been wasted. However, it was because of the original contract that she felt like she was trapped in a cocoon of her own making. In a strict business contract, rights and obligations were always equal. Because of the initial minimum salary clause, Lifetime TV also added a bargaining power to the contract. They agreed that the two parties could renegotiate the salary for the second season of the show. This was also a condition that Lifetime TV set to guarantee the production of the sequel. Lifetime TV's thinking was that if the ratings for America's Top Model did not explode, but still reach the standard of a sequel, then they hoped that Cindy would join the show for a lower salary. The two parties had even privately reached an agreement of $500,000. In a chat with Linda, Cindy said that she would be very satisfied if she could get $3 million in profits from America's Top Model. This was the realistic result she had come to after working in the television industry for a few years. In order to get US $3 million from this project, the number of viewers for America's Top Model had to reach 2.5 million. Back then, Lifetime TV had an average of less than 1 million viewers, so Syndicate didn't have high hopes for this goal. However, the ratings for the two shows had far exceeded everyone's expectations. For example, the most recent episode of America's Top Model, which she was in charge of, had reached 4.6 million viewers. Furthermore, as the number of subscribers to Lifetime TV continued to increase and the influence of the show continued to spread, Lifetime TV predicted that the highest viewership for the show could even exceed 6 million viewers. The average viewership for the entire season would not be lower than 4.5 million viewers. According to the floating price contract that Lifetime TV signed with advertisers, the average 30-second advertising fee for 1.5 million viewers would be $50,000. With an average viewership of 4.5 million viewers, the advertising fee would increase threefold. After the broadcast of the entire episode, Lifetime TV's advertising fee alone would bring in $60 million. The subsequent income from syndication, DVDs, and other miscellaneous income would also bring in no less than $60 million. A project that cost $20 million to produce would end up with $120 million in profits. After deducting the $20 million production cost, the net profit would be at least $100 million. With a 10% share of the profits, Cindy would be able to get $10 million. How many Hollywood A-listers could get $10 million a year? So here came the problem. With America's Top Model and Project Runway, she and Linda had not only crossed the threshold of $10 million a year, but they were also far ahead of all the other supermodels in the industry, who only had an annual income of $1 million. As long as the two shows maintained enough popularity, the two of them could even sit firmly in the position of the supermodel queens. However, the right to negotiate for the guaranteed salary had recently made Cindy restless. If the viewership ratings did not meet expectations, Lifetime TV could use the right to negotiate and reduce Cindy's guaranteed salary to save on the production budget. But now, the viewership ratings had skyrocketed, but the right to negotiate was still in effect. Cindy had received a whopping $10 million for the first season. So if the TV station wanted her to reduce her share for the sequel, it seemed very reasonable. If the two sides could not come to an agreement, Lifetime TV even reserved the right to change the host. Cindy was very unwilling to reduce her share of the profits. America's Top Model was more popular than Project Runway. If her share of the profits for the next season was lower than Linda's, she would become a joke. But the threat of being replaced made her even more afraid. Before the show had any prospects, the host position had already caused a lot of competition. In the end, it fell to her and Linda. America's Top Model was already a huge success. If she and Lifetime TV had a disagreement, the project team would reveal that they wanted to change the host. It would be strange if those jealous bitches did not fight over it. When the time came, the change of host would cause a media storm, and it would definitely cover the loss of popularity caused by her departure. In other words, America's Top Model did not rely on her that much, but she could not bear the impact of losing her position. After hesitating for a long time, Cindy finally took the initiative to look for Eric today, hoping to settle everything in advance. She also found a good reason for her visit. She wanted to start production on the second season at the end of the year. According to the competition rules, the final 3 contestants of Project Runway would appear at the New York Fashion Week in February next year. So the production would take more than half a year. During this time, there would be a 2-month winter break. It was impossible to produce 2 seasons per year. However, America's Top Model was different. A season of 13 episodes could all be broadcast in December. After the first season was broadcast, preparations would begin at the end of the year. The second season would be released in March next year. In the morning, she had rushed over to discuss her plan for the second season with Eric. She had even taken the initiative to tell him about her bargaining rights. Judging from the smile on Eric's face, he must have been gloating or something. However, he did not make things difficult for her. He personally promised her that her contract would remain the same, and said that he would talk to Anne Sweeney about it. She was finally able to put down the huge rock that had been tormenting her for half a month. Sigh, he really is a little man that makes me want to swallow him whole. As she recalled the situation not long ago, Cindy turned to look at Joanna, who was holding a small pair of scissors and carefully cutting the maple leaf that the little guy handed over. She then clipped it into the pages of a book. She could not help but ask, "Joan, is it boring to just take care of the child every day? In a few years you won't think so anymore. Women have to settle down." Joanna turned to look at Cindy and smiled. She continued, "You know, I was born in Poland. At that time, the Soviet Union was still around. The situation in Poland was not good. I was starving when I was a child. You must have never experienced starvation before." "Haha, I have always wanted to leave Poland since I was a child. After many twists and turns, I finally left. However, I realized that it was not heaven outside. I wandered around like this until 4 years ago, when I accidentally met Eric. Then I had Xiaxia," Joanna said casually. When she saw Hawaii running over again, she hugged her daughter and kissed her affectionately. The little girl was sensitive enough to sense the change in Joanna's emotions. She let her mother hug her and asked in confusion, "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing, baby." Joanna shook her head and let go of Hawaii. She looked at her watch and turned to Cindy, who was deep in thought. "Cindy, can you help me take care of Kevin and Xiaxia? I have to go and pick up Emma. The kindergarten is not far from here. I will be back in 15 minutes. "Of course, no problem." Cindy, who came back to her senses, quickly nodded. She then said, "By the way, Eric said that he would like to have lunch with Terry Semmel. I will ask the kitchen to prepare it," Joanna said to the 2 little guys. She then entrusted the task to Cindy and got up to leave. Watching Joanna walk away, Cindy patted the book that Joanna left in her hand and smiled at the 2 little guys. "Okay, babies, let's continue. Auntie Cindy will play with you, okay?" Hawaii and Kevin were not shy with strangers, but they were obviously not as intimate as Joanna. After a few minutes, they lost interest. Cindy did not have any experience in taking care of children, so she had to bring the 2 little guys back to the villa. When she pushed the door open and walked into the living room, Eric and Terry Semmel were still chatting. Seeing Cindy bring the 2 little guys back, Eric smiled and pointed to the living room on his right, indicating that Cindy could bring the children to play there. Terry Semmel looked at little Kevin and waved at Hawaii. When she received the little girl's response, she immediately showed a gentler smile. Since Terry Semmel had come in the name of visiting, she had been chatting with Eric. When she saw Cindy bring the 2 little guys into the living room, she knew that it was almost time. Terry Semmel said, "Eric, I actually came here for one more thing. Lifetime TV has been doing well recently, and Warner Cable has a large number of users. Maybe we can have a closer cooperation?" Eric picked up the coffee in front of him and took a sip. He then said, "Terry, although I don't pay much attention to the operations of the TV department, I have heard that the cooperation between Lifetime and Warner Cable has not been very pleasant." "Eric, it's impossible for companies to cooperate peacefully all the time. It's inevitable that there will be some disagreements. After all, both parties have to think about their own interests. Terry Semel casually analyzed the situation and said, "Given Lifetime's recent popularity, I think we can sign a new contract. Warner Cable can increase the user's share to 18 cents. What do you think?" Eric shook his head and said, 18 cents is too low. The highest viewership of America's Top Model has reached 4.6 million. There aren't many TV stations that can achieve this result, right? I think 18 cents is very generous, Eric. Terry Semel disagreed. America's Top Model and Project Runway are only broadcast for 2 hours a week, but the total primetime time is 22 hours a week. Other than these two reality shows, the ratings of Lifetime TV's other programs are not outstanding. Moreover, these two reality shows will end in 2 months. I'm afraid that Lifetime TV will not be able to find enough outstanding programs to take over their popularity. Therefore, in terms of overall strength, Lifetime TV is still insignificant. Chapter 749. After all, Lifetime TV station's foundation was still lacking. Eric checked Lifetime TV station's program list for the past few years. In 1994, Lifetime TV station had only released 11 low-budget movies and a few soap operas during the evening primetime slot. There was nothing new about the other programs during other time slots. However, since America's Top Model and Project Runway had made a good start and accumulated a lot of popularity, it was only natural that they would continue to invest in more programs. Terry, I admit that you're right, but this situation will soon become history. If Lifetime TV can create Project Runway and America's Top Model, then we can continue to produce more successful TV shows. Although the two reality shows will be finished before the new year, Lifetime has already decided to start production on the second season of America's Top Model. It will be released on time tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about Lifetime's popularity. After Eric finished speaking, he thought of Cindy's scheming look in the morning. He couldn't help but find it funny. Due to the broadcast cycle of Project Runway, there was no hope of producing 2 seasons a year. Therefore, Eric could only hope that Cindy would start production on the second season of America's Top Model at the end of the year to maintain Lifetime's rising popularity. However, although he had many workaholics around him, Cindy and Linda were obviously not. They had to produce 2 seasons a year and take care of many other things. It would definitely be very tiring. Eric had been thinking about how to persuade Cindy over the past few days. He even planned to give her a raise if necessary. However, before he could say anything, Cindy had delivered herself to him. Terry didn't know what Eric was thinking. He naturally thought that Eric was determined to win. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Eric, 20 cents is the highest price that Warner can offer." Eric stopped smiling and looked at Terry Semel. "If it's 20 cents, no problem, Terry. But I have a condition." Terry stretched out his hand and said, "Please say it." Lifetime can sign a 3-year contract with Warner Cable. The price will be fixed at 20 cents. However, Warner Cable needs to carry Lifetime signal in all of its cable packages. "Eric, that's impossible." Terry Semel immediately shook his head. According to the plan, once Warner Cable obtained the broadcasting authorization, they would provide some cable TV packages with Lifetime TV stations for users to choose from. Lifetime TV had a limited audience after all. When the time came, the number of subscribers for Lifetime TV under Warner Cable would increase to about 6 million. At most, it would not exceed half of Warner Cable's 15 million subscribers. However, Eric's current condition was that he wanted to swallow all of Warner Cable's user resources in one go. No matter what kind of consideration it was, Terry Semel would not agree to it. Eric did not have much of a reaction to Terry Semel's rejection. He said, "If that's the case, Terry, the other option is to increase the share to 30 cents. Then, we can renegotiate the share price every year." Terry Semel shook his head again and said, 30 cents is too high. Eric, I just said that Lifetime TV is only worth 20 cents at most. Eric nodded and took a sip of his coffee. He said, "In that case, let's call it a day. Terry, I'm not good at business negotiations. These things are usually handled by Jeffrey and the others. You can go back and think about it." Then, you can send someone to contact Firefly's management. After that, Eric looked at his watch and said, "It's almost lunchtime. You can try my apple pie later. I don't usually like to eat desserts, but Joan makes it very good." Terry Semmel's face became a little ugly. It was obvious that Eric was going to drag things out again. If they entered the formal business negotiation stage, it would take at least 10 days to half a month to resolve this matter. Eric obviously knew Time Warner's current situation like the back of his hand. Lifetime TV could afford to drag things out. After all, Comcast, Telcom and many other small cable and satellite operators were actively importing Lifetime TV. Lifetime did not lack channels at all. However, Warner Cable was losing tens of thousands of subscribers every day. It was impossible to drag things out. Terry Semmel hesitated for a few minutes. Eric knew that he was weighing the pros and cons. He did not disturb him and waited patiently. After a while, Terry Semmel finally spoke again. "Okay, Eric, 25 cents. I can't go any higher." Eric shook his head and shrugged. "Terry, I only have two choices here. Actually, 30 cents is not too high. ESPN's broadcasting fee is $1.3. Moreover, I actually recommend that you choose the first option. Trust me, in the next few years, Lifetime TV station's development will definitely surprise everyone. When that time comes, it will definitely become a regular TV station in all the operators' packages. Time Warner will also be able to enjoy 3 years of lower prices." Terry Semmel saw that there was no room for negotiation. He could only say, "Eric, in that case I will give you an answer tomorrow." Of course, no problem. Eric did not rush him. He knew that Terry Semmel's situation in Time Warner had not been good for the past 2 years. Hence, he had become a little cautious. He even had to discuss such a small cooperation with the company's top management or the board of directors. The next day, Eric received a call from Terry Semmel. Time Warner had finally chosen the second option, which was to increase the broadcasting fee to 30 cents. The specific cooperation proposal was, of course, the responsibility of the management. In the following days, Eric began to pay attention to the problems of Lifetime TV's program production. At this point, no one mentioned the original $100 million budget. Everyone knew that if they wanted to increase the viewership ratings of Lifetime's other programs to the same level as America's Top Model and Project Runway, a $100 million investment would never be enough. Firefly Group and Hearst Group were most concerned about how to maintain the strong popularity of the two reality shows as much as possible. Of course, the answer was very simple. They had to produce or purchase more high-quality TV shows. "I've already communicated with the headquarters. Lifetime will be able to get the broadcast rights for Sleepless in Seattle, Ghost, and Pretty Woman, which are very popular with women," Annie Sweeney reported to Eric in the ABC headquarters office. She was reporting the results of her recent work to Eric in the ABC headquarters office. The box office sales of the 3 movies had reached hundreds of millions of USD. Even after a few years, the price of a single broadcast was still above $1 million USD. Although they were all owned by Firefly Group, the finances of each department still had to be calculated clearly. Of course, Lifetime TV would also receive a very favorable price. Eric sat on the other side of the conference table and flipped through the work memo that Anne Sweeney had handed to him. He asked, "Then how do you plan to arrange their broadcasting schedule?" "As a guide to promote our new series next year, Lifetime has obtained a total of 6 broadcast rights. The regular primetime program is 22 hours a week, but Lifetime TV's capability is not enough to cover the entire time slot. Therefore, I plan to focus on creating a 12-hour primetime program from Sundays to Thursdays, and an hour on Fridays and Saturdays. Under normal circumstances, only the traditional 3 major TV stations could cover 22 hours of primetime each week. Even the current Fox TV station could not reach this level. Fox only had 18 hours of primetime each week." Eric was very satisfied with Anne Sweeney's programming plan. He nodded and asked, "Have you read the original novel and the first 2 episodes of Desire City?" "Yes." Anne Sweeney nodded. "What do you think?" Anne Sweeney thought for a moment and said, "Bold, avant-garde, fashionable, and a little feminine delicacy and slyness. I personally like this story very much. I believe the female audience will like it very much too. Eric smiled and said, "That's right." Also, avant-garde and fashionable. These two words can be used as the standards for future Lifetime TV programs. Although during our user surveys, we found that close to 30% of the audience for America's Top Model and Project Runway are male, don't think about broadening the audience for the TV stations. The TV stations for all ages are the responsibility of the major public television networks. What we need is a precise target. Lifetime TV has to target the audience to women between the ages of 18 to 35, who are fashionable and have strong spending power. We have to create programs that revolve around women in this age group. Eric, in this way, Lifetime TV's development potential will be limited to a certain extent. Young women between the ages of 18 to 35 will be in the minority. And Sweeney drew a circle on the paper and continued. You see, if this is a group of women between the ages of 18 to 35, we have to consider their needs at all times during the production process. Then the theme of the program will be restricted to an even smaller circle. There will definitely be a group of women in this small circle who will not like the theme. Then, some of the audience will leave, and the circle will become even smaller and smaller. Eric smiled as he took the pen and paper from Sweeney's hands. He drew a bigger circle outside the circle she had just drawn and said, "You're thinking in the wrong direction. I'm guessing that this circle refers to the female audience in North America. But outside of North America, there are even larger audiences in Europe, Asia, Latin America, and so on. As long as we can operate meticulously among this group of women and produce a large number of premium TV programs, we can form a stronger brand. Then Lifetime TV's signal will be able to reach a wider market outside of North America. I hope that you won't limit your vision to North America, but to the entire world. Your future business goal is to let all the women in the world have a deep-rooted impression of Lifetime TV. That is, Lifetime TV's programs are fashion indicators and a source of topics for women to talk about. It's best to reach the point where it's difficult for a girl to integrate into the female circle, if she hasn't watched Lifetime." And Sweeney's beautiful eyes widened slightly. She was very surprised by Eric's ambitious plan. She subconsciously asked, "Really? Can we do that?" When Ted Turner founded CNN in 1980, almost everyone laughed at him for overestimating himself. That was because the media industry believed that professional news channels couldn't possibly make money. But now CNN News Network has spread all over the world. The annual profits it generates are on par with the 3 major television networks. This is a possibility. Okay. And Sweeney shrugged and said, "Maybe I'm a pessimist and you're the opposite. Your words remind me of a saying. Do your best and prepare for the worst." And Sweeney raised her hand and rested her chin on her hand. She looked at Eric with admiration in her eyes. She chuckled and said, "Haha, Eric, so you're not 100% confident." Even a few months ago, who would have thought that Lifetime TV's program would be watched by more than 4 million people at the same time? So the prospects I described are real. Since there's such a potential gold mine, what we have to do is to dig it out as much as possible. And Sweeney lowered her head and flipped through the original program production plan. She said, "If we're more conservative, Lifetime TV will be able to generate good profits from this year onwards. But if we follow your idea and go for the best route, the investment in the production of the program will definitely increase greatly. In the next 2 to 3 years, Lifetime TV might not be able to generate any profits. Firefly is not a listed company, so you don't have to give up the long-term development plan for the sake of the financial report." "Yes." And Sweeney smiled again and said, "Since Big Boss doesn't mind, I'll do it. Yes, I'll rearrange the original plan." Eric smiled and nodded. "I can temporarily not ask for profits. But if we don't achieve a sufficient annual growth rate, we'll still be hit with a big stick. Hey boss, if you have some bad taste in your words, you should tell other women." After they finished talking, and Sweeney packed up the documents in front of her and hugged them to her chest. Just as she was about to leave, she thought of something and asked, "Oh yes, will you be attending the party tonight? America's Top Model, and Project Runway had achieved such outstanding results. The company definitely had to show their appreciation, so the party was set for tonight. Eric nodded and said, "I'll be there. Also, call and invite the author of Desire City, Candace Bushnell. I feel that there are some areas in the script that need to be changed for the first 2 episodes. There's also the follow-up plot. I plan to discuss it with her. Oh, and call Elizabeth Hurley as well. Tell her to meet Candace Bushnell in advance and talk about the female lead." Annie Sweeney also knew that Eric didn't have much time to discuss the script with Candace Bushnell, so she could only take advantage of the party. She nodded, and when she saw that Eric didn't have any other instructions, she turned around and left. Chapter 750. Night fell. Although the temperature in New York at night had dropped below 10 degrees at the end of October, it still didn't stop beautiful women in revealing clothes from entering and exiting various parties. Midtown Manhattan, a top restaurant in Rockefeller Center. Lifetime TV's celebration party was held here. Eric arrived at the party at 7 o'clock. The hall was already crowded. In addition to the executives of the TV department, the invited guests were mainly the creators of America's Top Model and Project Runway, as well as some contestants who were still in New York. And Sweeney had already arrived early to arrange some things in advance. When Eric walked into the hall, she greeted him with Cindy Crawford and Linda Evangelista. After some small talk, seeing that almost all the guests had arrived, and Sweeney picked up a glass of champagne from the waiter and walked to the stage where the band was. She gently knocked on the glass to Mike, signaling for everyone to be quiet, and began the party speech. "Okay, welcome to tonight's party. In the past month, we have witnessed the miracles created by America's Top Model and Project Runway with our own eyes. Just last night, the latest episode of America's Top Model had more than 5 million viewers. As the president of AE Television Network, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who participated in these 2 outstanding reality shows. At the same time, I hope that everyone can continue to work hard and continue to create more miracles. Here, please raise your glasses. Cheers." Amidst the applause and cheers, everyone raised the wine glasses in their hands. And Sweeney took a sip of champagne and said, "Then I hope everyone has a good time tonight. Thank you." There was another round of warm applause. And Sweeney walked off the stage, and the music started again. And Sweeney had just finished her speech when Cindy Crawford, who had been holding onto Eric's arm, pulled him onto the dance floor. At this time, she didn't hide her body tightly against Eric. She hugged the man's waist and whispered in his ear, "Eric, will you be in Manhattan on Halloween?" Eric enjoyed hugging the beauty in front of him, and said with a smile, "No, when the time comes, I'll take Emma and the other 2 to ask for candy. You know, the residents of the Hamptons are all very rich, so we should be able to get a lot of delicious food." Cindy rolled her eyes as she rubbed her soft body against Eric's body in a displeased manner. "If we're talking about wealth, who can compare to you?" Eric used a little force to stop Cindy's teasing and said, "Stop fooling around. Do you want me to embarrass myself in front of so many people?" Cindy giggled and whispered in his ear again, "How about we go to the bathroom?" Eric looked interested. "Is it a man or a woman?" "Of course it's up to you." Eric pretended to hesitate for a moment and said, "Then I've decided not to go. I'm a respectable person now." Eric stopped Cindy, who was about to make trouble again. He patted her slender waist and said, "Okay, you have fun. I just remembered that I have something important to do this time." Cindy immediately showed a pitiful expression. "Do you have to be in such a hurry? The party has just started, and the song hasn't ended yet." Eric was about to say something when he caught a glimpse of Linda Evangelina passing by. He waved at her, and Linda walked over in confusion. Eric pushed Cindy in his arms to Linda. "Linda, I have something to do. Why don't you dance with Cindy?" "Hee okay." Before Cindy Crawford could say anything, Linda Evangelista giggled and hugged her, dragging her to the dance floor. She even teased, "Cindy baby, let's go. I'll accompany you." Between the 2 women, Cindy Crawford, who often exercised, had more stamina, but this was a party. Of course, she wouldn't compare herself to Linda. She could only give Eric a resentful look as Linda dragged her away. Seeing Eric waving at them and then walking away, the resentment on Cindy Crawford's face immediately disappeared. She glared at Linda Evangelina, who was hugging her. "Okay, he's gone. Let go." However, Linda didn't listen to her. Instead, she pulled Cindy closer to her with a smile. One of them was handsome, while the other was charming. Linda was wearing a conservative black knee-length evening gown, which made her look even more capable. Now that she was standing next to Cindy, who was wearing a white deep V-neck evening gown, they looked like a couple. Even the surrounding couples who were dancing felt a little ashamed of their inferiority. Seeing that Cindy wanted to break free, Linda tightened her grip and said, "What? Are you in a hurry to find a man? Don't forget that Eric is still here. I just don't want to be together with you." Linda stared at her for a moment and said in a low voice, "Oh, I see. You're feeling inferior," Linda said and raised her chin proudly. She was a little taller than Cindy, and the heels she was wearing tonight happened to be taller than Cindy's. At this time, there was a clear difference in height between the two. She patted Cindy's waist and continued, "Don't worry. I won't dislike you." Cindy gritted her teeth and gestured at Linda's waist. "TCH, enough is enough." Linda's waist tightened, and she hurriedly reminded him with a guilty conscience, "Poise, pay attention to your poise. Don't forget where you are, I will scream." Cindy narrowed her eyes. "You're wrong. If you continue, I'll make you cry." After Eric left Cindy, he quickly found 3 women chatting on a sofa in the corner of the hall. They were Anne Sweeney, Elizabeth Hurley, and another woman who was about the same age as Anne Sweeney, around 35 years old. The woman was wearing a light blue one-shoulder evening gown. She had beautiful blonde hair, delicate features, and a pair of eye-catching pearl earrings. Eric had read some information and recognized this woman as Candace Bushnell, the author of City on Desire. When they saw Eric walk over, the 3 women stood up at the same time. And Sweeney stood up and introduced, "Eric, this is Candace Bushnell. Candace, this is Eric." "Hello, Mr. Williams." The woman gracefully extended her hand to Eric. "Just call me Eric." Eric shook her hand and greeted Elizabeth Hurley before they sat down again. He said, "There's no big problem with the script. It's just some small details. So, I think you can talk about the female lead first." A strange look flashed across Candace Bushnell's face. She realized that Eric had noticed something from the details of their conversation. However, she quickly regained her composure and said, "Eric, I don't think Miss Hurley is suitable for the role of Carrie Bradshaw." After saying this, Candace Bushnell tried her best to maintain eye contact with Eric. She didn't let her guilt show. However, the hand holding the wine glass had unknowingly tightened a little. Because of her yearning for life in the metropolis, Candace Bushnell came to New York alone at the age of 19. However, it wasn't as easy to settle down in Manhattan as she had imagined. At first, she could barely make ends meet by writing children's stories for newspapers. It was only in recent years that she had her own column in the New York Observer. Even so, her life wasn't considered rich. Carrie Bradshaw, who often hovered on the edge of bankruptcy in pursuit of fashion, was actually a true portrayal of herself. Eric Williams had personally selected the copyright of City on Desire, which made her realize that this would be an important turning point in her life. Therefore, she valued this TV series more than anyone else. In recent days, in order to write a satisfactory script, she had repeatedly revised and deliberated over the process. She even suffered from a slight anxiety disorder. When she heard that Lifetime TV had selected Elizabeth Hurley as the female lead, she immediately found many videos of Elizabeth Hurley in the past. Then, she realized that the British supermodel didn't fit the image of the female lead at all. The candidate was personally selected by Eric Williams. She knew that she had no room to resist. Originally, she had secretly convinced herself to silently accept it. However, in the process of interacting with Anne Sweeney, she felt that the female president of AE Television Network didn't seem to be satisfied with the female lead candidate. The two sides reached some consensus in private, which led to today's scene. When Eric heard this, he quietly looked at Candace Bushnell. Looking at this beautiful woman, who was biologically at least 10 years older than him, forcing herself to maintain a confident expression, it was quite satisfying. After more than 10 seconds, Eric noticed that the glass in the woman's hand trembled slightly. Then he stopped. He raised his hand and said, "Continue. Convince me." After Candace Bushnell said those words, every time she thought about Eric's identity, the pressure in her heart increased a little. She felt more and more regretful. She secretly scolded herself a few hundred times. This was a great opportunity. If she could work with Eric Williams, she would definitely be able to join the ranks of famous writers in the future. Based on all these, I think that the female lead should be more in line with the average standard of urban women. Her appearance is a little more ordinary, but sometimes she will be radiant. Eric nodded. Good reason. Anything else? Noticing the change in Eric's expression, Candace Bushnell finally relaxed. This young Mr. Big seemed to have listened to her. Then at least this matter would not have any negative impact on her. Although there was another reason in her heart, which was told to her by Anne Sweeney in private. And Sweeney felt that Elizabeth Hurley's acting was not good enough during the audition. And Anne Sweeney had hinted that she should add this reason to the topic of persuading Eric. However, at this time, Candace Bushnell did not want to add feet to a snake. She would leave it to Anne Sweeney. She shook her head and said, "Mr. Williams, that's all." Eric nodded with a smile on his face. "You like to call people Mr." Candace Bushnell's expression was a little unnatural. She also realized that she was not confident enough, but she would not take the initiative to admit it. After this topic, she relaxed a little. Her usual shrewdness began to return. She asked in return, "Why do you ask?" "I often see Mr. Big in your novels." To be honest, does this guy have a prototype?" Candace Bushnell realized that Eric had unknowingly changed the topic, but at this time, she did not have the courage to ask Eric to give an accurate answer. She went along with the topic and said, "Yes, there is a prototype. Mr. Big is a publishing executive at the Newhouse Group. His name is Ron Girardi. He is in charge of the publishing work of many magazines. I have worked with him before." "Oh." Eric nodded, but in his heart, he was inexplicably reminded of another Mr. Big from a certain Disney animation in his previous life. He found it rather funny. In the traditional sense, Mr. Big should be a big boss, almost equivalent to a godfather. Let's not talk about Ron Girardi, since I don't know him anyway. Let's talk about your male lead. I'm a little confused about his character setting. This is also a question I had when I read your script outline, and the script for the first 2 episodes. Is this person's character setting a little vague? Candace Bushnell thought for a moment and said, "First of all, he is a very successful man." "That can be seen," Eric said. "What about his character?" "His character should be a little indecisive. So he doesn't like strong and independent women," Candace Bushnell said. "This is also the main reason why they will break up and get back together in the plot. Well, in the end, they probably won't have a happy ending." "Then do you think this setting is reasonable?" "Why is it not reasonable?" Candace Bushnell asked doubtfully. "Mr. Williams, everyone has a flaw. A person being successful in their career does not mean that they will also be successful in their relationship." She stared at Eric without blinking, as if she was resisting. "Then even if I take the initiative, what are you going to do, little boy?" "Wow, are you provoking me?" Chapter 752. Candace Bushnell woke up naturally after a good night's sleep. She stretched her body comfortably on the big bed. When her hand touched the wall at the head of the bed, Candace Bushnell realized that this was not the bedroom she was familiar with. The door happened to be pushed open at that moment. She quickly shrank back under the covers, but she was still noticed by the man who came in. "Good morning." Eric greeted the woman on the big bed with a smile. He put the evening gown down at the end of the bed, and turned to draw the curtains. Candace Bushnell's gaze followed Eric's figure to the window. She watched him draw the curtains, and the bright sunlight shone into the bedroom. She finally woke up completely. God, it wasn't a dream. She actually slept with this young man in front of her. God. Candace Bushnell felt her face heat up when she thought about how she had slept with this man who was 13 years younger than her. She was a little embarrassed, a little shy, and a little excited. When she saw Eric walk over and sit down on the chair beside the bed, Candace Bushnell was a little embarrassed. She pulled the covers up to cover her face. She thought about it and felt that it was a little inappropriate. She greeted him slowly. "Good morning, Mr. Big." Eric looked at Candace Bushnell's girlish reaction and nodded. He teased her. "Oh, I understand. That should be considered a compliment." Candace Bushnell was stunned. When she realized what he meant, she couldn't help but chuckle. She was too embarrassed to respond. When Eric saw that Candace Bushnell didn't say anything, he didn't force her. He said, "Candace, I've already had your gown washed and ironed. It's like this. I have a meeting at 9 o'clock. Candace Bushnell poked her head out from under the covers and asked, "What time is it now?" Eric looked at his watch and said 8:30. "The car is already waiting for me downstairs." "Oh, it's already so late." Then Candace Bushnell was about to sit up when Eric pressed down on her shoulder and said, "No, you can sleep a little longer. You can get up whenever you want. I just want to say goodbye." Candace Bushnell had slept until 2 in the morning. Although she had already woken up, she felt weak all over. She didn't want to get up at this time, so when she heard Eric's words, she didn't force herself. After lying down, she turned her body. She couldn't help but feel curious about Eric. She probed, "Is it an important meeting?" "If you follow the recent media news, you should know that ESPN is about to sign a new contract with the National Football League," Eric explained. He then smiled and said, "I almost forgot. Women should not be as interested in sports as men are in fashion, right?" Candace Bushnell shook her head and said, "Of course not. I was a cheerleader for my school's football team when I was young." Eric knew that she was just being polite. He smiled and took out a card from his suit pocket and placed it on the bedside table. He said, "I made some breakfast. You can eat some when you get up. If you don't like it, there's more in the fridge. The driver's number is on the card. If you need a car later, you can call this number." Candace Bushnell was a little disappointed that Eric didn't give her his personal business card. However, she didn't take the initiative to ask for it. Both of them knew that this was just an ordinary one-night stand. She wasn't stupid enough to ask for more. When the woman nodded, Eric continued, "Also regarding the female lead of Want City, I discussed it with and over the phone this morning. Since Liz isn't suitable, we'll have to find another candidate. But we have to be quick. We can't drag this out for too long." Candace Bushnell knew that since Eric had appointed Elizabeth Hurley as the female lead, their relationship was definitely not ordinary. When she heard what he said, she asked, "Then, what about Miss Hurley?" "You don't have to worry about that. I'll arrange it." After Eric finished speaking, he got up and said, "Then goodbye." "Goodbye." Candace Bushnell reached out from under the blanket and waved at Eric. When she heard the door close, Candace Bushnell turned around and lay on her back on the big bed. She stared blankly at the ceiling for a while. She felt that she couldn't fall asleep anymore, so she had to get up. She fumbled around for her underwear and put it on. Barefoot, she walked into the bedroom. When she saw a note on the sink and a cup of brand new dental equipment in it, her somewhat empty mood suddenly improved a lot. She tore off the note and took a look. So this is what he wrote. She thought to herself. She subconsciously put the note under her nose and sniffed it. Then she secretly laughed at her own infatuated behavior. She put the note down and noticed the big bathtub in the bathroom. She suddenly became interested again. After a comfortable hot bath, she wrapped herself in a bathrobe and went downstairs. There were a few simple breakfasts on the coffee table in the living room. As usual, it was a very considerate note. Next to it was her bag and phone. She walked over and turned on the phone that had been turned off last night. She looked around and saw a round table not far away by the floor-to-ceiling window. She picked up the breakfast and walked over. There was also a stack of newspapers on the table. She guessed that he would read the newspapers while eating. She remembered that Eric had casually mentioned the cooperation between ESPN and the National Football League before he left. Although Candace Bushnell had no interest in sports, she still curiously flipped through the newspapers while eating breakfast. The New York Times indeed used a large page to report on the cooperation negotiations between ESPN and the National Football League, NFL. In the past, ESPN's contract for the broadcasting rights of NFL games was negotiated on a yearly or season-by-season basis. This time, however, ESPN was ambitious and wanted to sign an 8-year contract with the NFL. Moreover, it was a completely exclusive contract. Once the contract was signed, ESPN would have the exclusive broadcasting rights of the NFL every week. Candace Bushnell didn't understand the various professional analyses in the newspaper articles. She was secretly speechless when she saw that the total contract amount was $9 billion. $9 billion was already beyond the scope of her imagination. $9 billion for an 8-year contract. Was the broadcasting rights of NFL games really worth that much money? ESPN was a TV station owned by Firefly. They wouldn't lose money because of this, would they? While her thoughts were running wild, her phone suddenly rang. As soon as she picked it up, a somewhat noisy female voice came from the receiver. Listening to her best friend bombarding her with a series of questions without any intention of stopping, Candace Bushnell had to take the initiative to interrupt her. Okay, Sonia. I admit that I slept with him. Stop being so long-winded. There was another round of exclamations from the other side. Candace Bushnell helplessly moved the receiver away from her ear. After her friend finished speaking, she said, "Come on, Sonia. I was hoping to find my Mr. Big, but this is Mr. Big. A delicate little woman like me will be crushed into powder if I pounce on him. This is just a one-night stand. I don't know why either. Anyway, I was brought back in a daze by him. Also, now that you mention it, I remember that those women at the party last night with glowing eyes must have hated me to death. Well, it seems like I have to be more careful these days to prevent being schemed against." Oh now. Candace Bushnell heard another question from her best friend. She looked out of the glass window and her vision fell on Central Park, which was shrouded in sunlight. Central Park in late autumn was not as vibrant as it was in summer. However, the red maple leaves and yellow leaves complemented each other, giving people a colorful and dreamy feeling. I'm sitting in the penthouse apartment at the entrance of 6th Avenue, eating breakfast made by Mr. Big himself. At the same time, I'm also enjoying the scenery of Central Park in Uptown. I have to say the view here is amazing. I want to stay here and not leave, even if I have to live here as a maid. Him? He's already gone to work. How can he be as leisurely as us little women? What? Don't even think about it. If I let you in, who knows what kind of trouble you'll cause. No, okay, absolutely not okay. Candace Bushnell didn't know what was said on the other side. She blushed and spat, but the voice on the other side of the phone was relentless. "Ah, you shameless woman," Candace Bushnell shouted, her face red, but there was a smile on her lips. She couldn't stand it anymore. After a moment, she seemed to be unable to withstand her best friend's relentless pursuit. She stuttered for a moment, her fingers unconsciously gesturing as she replied, "He's probably a little, the kind in bed, and then, well, it's very comfortable. He can definitely send you to the sky and float for a night, but it won't prevent you from getting out of bed and walking back on your own the next day. Bah, you bad girl. How dare you say I'm a wanton woman? You were the one who asked such a dirty question first. Oh, I understand, you're jealous, yes, jealous, humph." Eric's residence was less than 2 kilometers away from the ABC headquarters on 67th Street in the Upper West Side. When Candace Bushnell and her best friend were talking about him in private, Eric had already arrived at the ABC headquarters. Today they were going to discuss a topic of great importance to ESPN, and even the television department of Firefly. It was about the $9 billion broadcast rights contract between EPSN and the National Football League. Among the hundreds of cable television stations that had appeared in the United States, ESPN was undoubtedly the most dazzling one. Since the late 1980s, ESPN had become the premier television station for all sports fans in North America with the large number of broadcast rights contracts in its hands. What's more, ESPN was the most expensive of all the television stations in North America. It was also the only basic cable television station that had an average subscription fee of more than $1. Even the similarly popular CNN under Turner Broadcasting only had an average subscription fee of 68 cents. The average subscription fee of all the cable television stations in North America was about 20 cents, less than 1/6 of ESPN's. In his memory, the market value of Disney, which had swallowed ABC, was about $200 billion at its peak. However, ESPN alone was worth $50 billion. After the decline of public television networks, ESPN's profits and revenue accounted for more than half of Disney's total television revenue. Although Eric didn't pay much attention to sports in his previous life, he also remembered that after the new century, when various sports television stations were competing to catch up, the main reason why EPSN was able to maintain its strong position in the industry was that it held a large number of sports broadcast rights in its hands. As the most popular sports in the United States, the broadcast rights of the NFL were certainly in the hands of ESPN. Eric didn't know the development trajectory of EPSN until a few days ago, when ESPN president Steve Stan came up with an ambitious plan to monopolize the broadcast rights of the NFL league. Only then did he understand how ESPN rose to prominence. ESPN's current subscribers were about 90 million, and the average subscription fee was $3. The total annual broadcast rights share and advertising revenue was about $2 billion. Therefore, when this huge plan involving $9 billion came out, Robert Iger, who had just replaced Tom Murphy in charge of the television business, was shocked. Robert Iger was very interested in the prospects described by Steve Stan, but he felt that the possibility of the plan being implemented was very slim. Although he didn't have much hope, he still submitted the plan to Katzenberg. Katzenberg's vision was also very sharp. Of course, he saw the huge potential hidden in this plan, but at the same time, he also saw the greater risk in the plan. Once the contract was won with $9 billion and the plan failed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, there was another disadvantage to this plan. Because they wanted to monopolize the broadcast rights of all events, the price of $9 billion had exceeded the original broadcast rights price by more than 50%. Therefore, since ESPN raised the price of the NFL league, other leagues would definitely ask for a price increase. Once the contract was reached and ESPN's revenue growth did not meet expectations, not to mention the gradual increase in the broadcast rights licensing price, just paying the NFL's annual copyright fee of $125 billion was enough to slowly drag ESPN down. In the end, Katzenberg couldn't make a decision and had to submit the plan to Eric himself. Although he knew that ESPN's way to maintain a strong position in the industry was to monopolize the live broadcast of various events, Eric was still taken aback when he saw the contract amount that could reach $9 billion for the first time. He had originally made up his mind that Firefly would maintain a stable operating strategy in the next few years and would not make too many moves. However, since he was aware of ESPN's past glory, ESPN's president, Stan, personally explained to Eric the various powerful relationships involved in the contract. Eric finally agreed, so today's high-level meeting was held. In the conference room at ABC headquarters, in addition to Eric himself, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Frank Stan, Robert Iger, and other senior executives of the group, as well as Tom Murphy, Warren Buffett, and other board representatives sat in their respective seats. They listened attentively and cautiously to ESPN's president, Steve Byrne, as well as Stan, the results of the negotiations with the NFL. Chapter 754. Seeing Virginia curled up on the sofa and throwing a tantrum, Eric had to call the servant to take the 3 kids away. He then squeezed onto the sofa, hugged the woman and said, "Okay, there's a limit to how strong you can be. Xiaxia's situation is a bit special. Don't always compare Kevin to her." Virginia leaned into Eric's arms and whispered, I know. I'm just worried that you won't like Kevin in the future." Listening to Virginia's stuttering words, Eric knew that she was far more worried than that. Although the woman had never mentioned anything about the Hawaii fund in front of him, The overseas investment fund he set up in his daughter's name still had some impact on Virginia. With the skyrocketing market value of Nokia in the past few years, the 51% share of Nokia held by the Hawaii Fund had a market value of more than $3 billion. Eric could feel Virginia's worry about the future from the little details that she had always been worried about. Everyone had a preference, and Eric also admitted that he could not always be impartial. Although the birth of these two little fellows was beyond Eric's expectations, he didn't have any resistance. Instead, he was rather gratified. At least in this unfamiliar world, he already had two blood-related relatives. Holding Virginia, Eric thought for a moment and said, "Vicky, Buffett invited me to a party on Thursday. Come with me." Virginia realized that since Eric said so seriously, this party would definitely not be an ordinary party. Taking her to the party was equivalent to publicly acknowledging her identity to the outside world. She looked up with some surprise, but then her face showed hesitation. "Then what about Joan?" "I'll tell her. You know, Joan won't be too interested in these things." Virginia bit her lip and hesitated for a moment. She made up her mind and shook her head. "Forget it, I don't want this to affect my relationship with Joan." "Joan will definitely understand." "It's settled then. Find some time in the next 2 days to choose a better gown." Eric patted Virginia's shoulder and did not allow her to refute. He changed the topic and said, "Let's talk about the movie. How do you feel about it?" Virginia saw that Eric changed the topic and no longer resisted. She said, "Since Island Horror, I can only play a mother now. This time, I'm a single mother." Eric smiled and said, "At least you're a beautiful single mother." While they were talking, there was a sound of fast footsteps. Before Eric could turn his head, a fragrant little body between him and Virginia, squeezing Virginia away, and called out, "Eric." The person who came was naturally Drew. Virginia, who was pushed away, angrily slapped Drew's thigh. But the girl did not take it seriously. She giggled and kicked twice, still clinging to Eric. Virginia had to get up and give up the armchair completely. She tidied up her messy clothes and said, "It's almost time to prepare dinner. Don't mess around for too long." Virginia then left the room. Eric hugged the girl's waist and asked, "When did you arrive in New York?" Drew kicked off the camel leather boots on his feet and curled up next to Eric. He said, "Not long ago. I got on the plane with Amy this morning. She went to Manhattan to meet Frank." Eric only paid attention to the general situation of MGM and did not deliberately interfere with the specific operations. This time, he did not expect Amy Pascal to come to New York. He asked, "The film release at the end of the year is a critical time. Is it appropriate for the three of you to leave Los Angeles?" "It's a very important matter this time. We have to discuss the adjustment of the price of the additional shares. In the past few months, the Nasdaq has risen 16% and has exceeded 750 points. If we still use the price a few months ago, we will be at a disadvantage. Anyway, we only have Scream and Mean Girls at the end of the year. It's okay to leave for a few days." In his memory, the Nasdaq started to soar in 1995. Eric's rebirth did not change much. Listening to the girl's words, he just pinched her face and smiled. "Not bad. You can say so many professional terms in one breath. It seems that you have worked hard in the past few months." Drew bit Eric's finger and said unhappily, "You're annoying. Was I stupid before?" "You're not stupid. You're just not smart enough." Eric avoided the girl's little white teeth and said, "After the price adjustment, how much can we raise?" "After deducting the various fees, it should be about US $1.05 billion, Drew said and said, "By the way, when we came yesterday, the chairman of Morgan Stanley, Seymour Gilbert, invited us to a cocktail party tomorrow night. He also asked if you were free to go." Because of Chris, Firefly System had always maintained a close relationship with Morgan Stanley. In addition to the MGM stock offering this time, Morgan Stanley was also responsible for the online listing in the U.S. and the listing of Nokia shares in the U.S. stock market in the past 6 months. The listing of AOL and Nokia was scheduled for January next year. If there was not too much disagreement between the two sides, Yahoo's future IPO would definitely be handled by Morgan Stanley. However, Eric had never met the chairman of Morgan Stanley, Seymour Gilbert. Since there was this opportunity, he nodded and agreed. Okay, where are we going tomorrow? Manhattan. The girl tilted her head and thought for a while. She said, I can't remember the specific address. Anyway, someone will pick us up. Eric nodded and said, since the release date is set for December 9th, the release of Scream on Thanksgiving Day will be increased. Although the market is already full of confidence in MGM, the box office success of this low-cost film will still play a good role. I know Amy also thought about it. The production budget of this film is US $14 million. We plan to invest US $10 million in publicity. If the box office is good in the first week, we can continue to increase. Eric continued. In addition, since there is no problem with the release, MGM won't be short of funds in the next few years. So you should take back the film rights that MGM has licensed to the public as soon as possible. Drew nodded and looked at Eric, waiting for him to continue. Eric had been thinking about the issue of a paid streaming platform. At present, the three major film companies, Firefly, Fox and MGM, had more than 10,000 films in their libraries, but the three companies did not have a dedicated streaming platform. They could only sell the rights to other companies. Originally, the best choice was of course to acquire HBO from Time Warner. Time Warner's situation was not very good in the past 2 years. Eric also thought that there was an opportunity, but last time, when Terry Semel came to visit because of the Lifetime TV station, Eric tried to sound him out, but he was rejected without hesitation. Although HBO had not risen to fame with original series such as City to Prosper and The Sopranos, with the cable operating platform in Time Warner's hands, HBO's operating condition had always been very good. It could be said that it was a quality asset similar to Turner Broadcasting under Time Warner. In this case, even if Terry Semel agreed to divest and sell, the board of directors of Time Warner would not approve. Therefore, unless Time Warner was swallowed whole, Eric's wish to buy HBO would be very difficult to achieve. With this in mind, Eric continued, you guys can do these things first. At the same time, you have to immediately stop the new TV broadcast authorization. I plan to create a pay cable channel next year that specializes in movies. When the time comes, Firefly, MGM, and Fox will cooperate with us. The girl twisted in Eric's arms and said, can't it be just the two of us? You know my plan. Eric smiled and said, so if you don't want to deal with Liz, let Amy and the others take care of it. Okay. The two of them did not know how long they talked for, but there was a soft knock on the door behind them. Eric turned his head and saw Joanna standing by the door looking at the two of them. Eric, Drew, it's time for dinner. Okay. Eric stood up with the girl and went to the corridor outside the door. Joanna, who was beside him, gently pulled his sleeve. Eric saw that Joanna seemed to have something to say, so he pushed Drew and said, you go down first, we'll come over. Drew made a flirtatious look and did not say anything. He walked towards the stairs. What's wrong? Seeing Drew's figure disappear, Eric asked Joanna. Come with me. Joanna brought Eric to her bedroom and took out a pink gift box from the bedside drawer. She handed it to Eric and said, Terry Semel suddenly asked someone to send this over this morning. Eric took out the exquisite card that was clipped to the gift box and saw a line of words written on it. To the beautiful and smart Miss Hawaii Williams, from Terry Semel. Eric smiled and opened the paper. Inside was a videotape. The beautiful plastic packaging had a picture of an Antarctic penguin printed on it. The title was Penguin World. It looked like a documentary. Eric knew that in his previous life, Warner released a famous documentary called The Emperor Penguin Diary. However, this one was obviously not. When Joanna saw the cover of the videotape, a look of realization appeared on her face. She told Eric about the incident between Terry Semel and Hawaii. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.